Thank you for tuning in to LA Talk Live, reality radio handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we're more than just talk. Stay tuned.
Joshua Lane, member of the board of directors of Dr. Ann Wigmore's Hippocrates Health Institute, Josh Lane was part of the Dr. Ann Wigmore team that brought wheatgrass, sprouts, and raw foods to a worldwide audience. And now the host of Here's to Your Health on LA Talk Live, Joshua Lane.
Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Here's to Your Health on the LA Talk Live television network. I'm your host, Joshua Lane. And our first guest is the author Kathleen Barnes, who has actually written or co-written, at this point, 19 books on health and healing. One of her books on thyroid I thought was excellent. She's well-liked in the profession. Her books are timely and intelligent and carefully done. And Kathleen is calling in today from her home in North Carolina. Kathleen Barnes, are you there?
I am.
Good,
Glad
Kathleen.
to talk to you, Joshua.
Good, thank you. I'm happy to have you today on Here's to Your Health. Now, you have many books, and one of the books I'd like to show as well. You have a new book here, a small pamphlet on stress. And, as we get older, I think many of us have more respect for stress. What was it that prompted you to write that particular book?
That's a really good question because I think it's pretty personal. I've written, as you said, 19 books and written about kind of all aspects of natural health, and I keep seeing it over and over again that stress is an underlying cause of so many disease states, and it so profoundly affects all of our lives. And, on a really personal basis, I just decided it was time because my life is pretty stressful. And in the past year, I went through the final illness and finally the death of my mother, dealing with her estate while we were in the process of a major building project at our house, and trying to work in the middle of all of that, and I realized that my stress levels were probably just off the map. If you've ever taken any of those stress tests, you'll know that it's like, wow. And I knew that I needed to deal with it. So I started doing the research because that's kind of how I deal with my questions and my own personal health concerns, and decided it was time that we do this book because all of us are experiencing this in one way or another.
And was there anything that you discovered through reading and experience and working with fellow practitioners that surprised you about working with stress?
I think, something that has surprised me for a while is the number of disease conditions that are caused by stress. I mean, quite directly, it's not just like, stress might be a factor, but stress causes inflammation in the body. And if you're conscious of the numerous effects that inflammation has, then you will start to get the message pretty quickly that this is an underlying cause of diabetes, heart disease, obesity, cancer, possibly even memory loss, Alzheimer's, dementia, and all of those things. And that underlying inflammation is just huge. Also decreased immune system function, hypertension. I think we all are kind of conscious of that when we're feeling stressed, that the blood pressure goes up.
Yes.
So there are so many things that I think that kind of shocked me. And I think I saw some statistic a few years back that said 75% of all visits to a doctor's office have stress as an underlying cause.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Now,
and a lot of times I don't think we're even conscious of that. I'm feeling stressed, so that's why I have headaches. Well, yes, that may be why you have high blood pressure. Those are two kind of obvious ones. But maybe not so obvious as suddenly your blood sugars are going out of control, or, you're having chest pain, or possibly even cancer.
And because I have a food orientation, and you just mentioned the term blood sugar, what are some of the ideas that you have found to be important for a person who wishes to control stress by controlling blood sugar?
I think especially, I'm a foodie too, and a healthy foodie. And I think eating a lot of foods that have B vitamins in them helps to soothe the nerve pathways and pathways and to relieve stress. I think that's a big one, and most of us know what those B vitamins are, but we get them in lots of fruits and vegetables. And I'm a proponent of a very heavy fruits and vegetable based diet, with some healthy fats and a few healthy grains. I think I'm getting less and less on the carb train than I used to be, just kind of learning from example on that. So I think food is a very important element of stress reduction, I think.
And when you're talking about food and we're talking about stabilizing blood sugar, do you have a protocol that you recommend?
Well, I'm not a medical practitioner, so I'm a little reluctant to go there. But basically, I think low carbohydrate. As I said, I'm starting to get back on. It's interesting. I recently helped edit the book for Dr. John Salerno. It'll be out in a few months, and he has the Salerno Center in New York. And he worked with Dr. Atkins, and I think Dr. Atkins has been pretty much maligned. People thought that he was a proponent of the bacon double cheeseburger diet, which was not really the case at all.
Right.
His admonition to people was to eat low carbohydrates and to get your carbohydrates from vegetables and a little bit of fruit, not a huge amount of fruit even, and to stay away from the grains and the wheat products and things like that. And I think he was right, and I think that's kind of coming around again. And so that's what keeps the blood sugars low. And then the whole cascade of things that go from there make it a healthy diet in general. And I think a great way of dealing with the chronic stress, because I'm not kind of talking about when I talk about stress, I'm not talking about I almost got hit by a car when I was walking across the street. I'm really talking about the stress that we all hold on into in our lives for months, years. We don't release it, and that's the toxic kind of stress. And we all have stress. It happens. It's what we do about it. And so food is a very important element of that, and I think a low glycemic diet is really smart. I think a low glycemic load diet is probably even more important than glycemic index. I think, to me, that's a little bit better way of calculating what a food is going to do to you. I think I saw a chart one time that said it kind of showed the glycemic index that it was that a Snickers bar was healthier than a cup of watermelon.
Oh yes, I remember those kind of. I remember that era myself, Kathleen. By the way, for those of you just tuning in, we are speaking with Kathleen Barnes, the author of a number of books, actually 19 books. Her new book on stress. And Kathleen Barnes has really some very good books. One of the books that I actually liked by Kathleen was her book on thyroid. Now, Kathleen, you've used a couple of terms. I'd like you to define them for my listeners. What is a carbohydrate?
Carbohydrate is anything that's going to elevate your blood sugar in the simplest sense, I think. Again, I'm not a dietitian or a nutritionist, but that's my understanding of it. Anything that elevates sugars, and so what we're talking about in our diets is even vegetables have carbohydrates in them. They're usually quite low. Fruits tend to be pretty high in carbohydrates, some more so than others. And then when we go to the grains and the breads and the sugars and all of that sort of thing, and we need carbohydrates. I mean, they are fuel for our system. Glucose is a fuel for the body. So that's important. But what we don't need is table sugar. What we don't need is Cinnabons or, I'm trying to think what else, those giant bagels and things like that.
Ring-dings, devil dogs.
Those are the kind of carbohydrates that raise our blood sugars.
Little Debbie's cakes. So really, now, not to cast aspersions, so your ideas, we've been chatting really about stress and how blood sugar plays into stress. And so by eating protein, the ideas of Atkins, which I also, by the way, in the past 3 or 4 years, have really, I never disliked Atkins. I always thought that he was maligned, as you mentioned. And I thought that all the information that he offered, he had just simply obtained from AMA journals. And the thing that was really so radical about Atkins was in the 70s, he told Americans, listen, Americans, if you want to be healthy, don't eat any processed sugar and focus on eating protein foods. And while to you and I in the profession, it just seemed like good information, I guess that was deemed so radical that the powers that be just had to attack Atkins, and they did.
They sure did, yeah, and I guess fairly successfully, because people still remember him as the bacon double cheeseburger man,
right?
Which was not true at all.
Yes, it was not. It was not. No, Atkins, I think in general had some very good information, quite frankly, and also
he did.
Yes, as you, I'm from the same philosophical school on nutrition, and also I've also come to eat a lot less, even things like apples. I just eat a lot less fruit than I did when I was a man in my 20s, and I think I just feel better eating a lot less fruit.
I agree with you. I'm working with that myself. I mean, I've never been a huge fruit eater, but I try to limit it to 2 servings a day.
Mm-hmm. Now,
and I found, interestingly, I found last summer, I don't know, I was thirsty a lot, and it was probably a stress response as well. I got into grapes, and I wanted to eat a lot of grapes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, grapes are really high in sugar. It's
right.
really a lot of high concentrated sugar. And so when I finally realized that, I said, wait a minute, I've eaten a pound of grapes today? That's crazy. What are you doing?
Right. Easy to do it, but it turns out to be a lot, especially as we get older. Are there any other items besides B vitamins that you mentioned that are just very commonplace that people can use for stress?
Are you talking about food items?
Food items or supplement items that you're happy to recommend?
Well, I think rhodiola is one of my favorite supplements. I love rhodiola rosea. And I think that it is great for dealing with stress. It's also great for dealing with depression and anxiety. Works quickly, almost no side effects as far as I know. I mean, I never recommend that people take handfuls of vitamins or supplements of any kind, because I find it interesting that people have this sort of two-sided view of supplements. Oh, they're good for me, so I should take handfuls of them. No, they're and because they're good for you, and because in the right circumstances they can be very healthy. That that doesn't mean that if one is good, 20 is better at all. Any more than people who would take an aspirin for a headache wouldn't take 20 aspirin.
Right.
So I think we need to be really conscious of that. And I use them sparingly, and I use whole food vitamins. I also I think for general physiological well-being, whole food multivitamins that are organic are really important, because you're getting all the elements of the molecules of the nutrients that are in them, not just the ascorbic acid, for example, that some people think is vitamin C but is not. And so I like whole food vitamins rather than stuff that's chemically and synthetically concocted to try to replicate those, which it could never really replicate them.
Right. And Kathleen, because you are the author of so many books, we are talking about stress here, but if I could just move the conversation slightly, you have a book, which we have displayed on camera, about HCG. Now, that seems to be, that's been popular now for a while, but it does seem to be somewhat controversial. Can you please give me your thoughts on the HCG diet and tell my listeners what that diet is? Okay,
HCG is human chorionic gonadotropin, and it is if people who remember the old days, actually that's a pregnancy hormone that turns your pregnancy test to say you're pregnant. All of us, men and women, produce HCG, but women produce it in very, very large amounts when they're pregnant. The theory behind the HCG that's used either injectably or as drops for weight loss, and I know this is controversial, and the FDA does not seem to be liking it at all these days.
I did not know that.
And they've been putting the squeeze on a lot of companies. But the theory behind it is that one, it helps you to stay on a very low-calorie diet. The way I did HCG, I lost 100 pounds.
Really?
And I've kept off about 85 of those pounds,
100 pounds.
Which I think is pretty good. And I was eating 700 calories a day. The original HCG diet was 500 calories a day, and I knew that I had so much weight to lose I was going to be on it for quite a while, and so I decided that 700 was a more reasonable a number of calories, and I was on it for 9 months that it took me to get rid of 100 pounds. Now, what the HCG did was help me to, eating 700 calories a day, anybody is going to lose weight. Let's face it.
Yes.
That's
I think
totally
so.
logical.
Right.
Of course you are. What the HCG did was a couple of things. One, it helped me to stay on it. I kind of challenge anybody there to, and anybody out there in radio land to stay on a 700 calorie diet a day for very long. You're hungry, and pretty soon you'll break it. The HCG helped to take care of the hunger, and it also signals the body, and that's where the sort of the pregnancy hormone comes into it. It signals the body to burn fat rather than muscle.
I see.
So actually, the body is using the fat, the excess fat, as fuel, as opposed to eating up your muscle and making you debilitated and weak and all of those things, which diets tend to have a tendency to do that, and that's why people don't stay on them, because they start getting weak and they start looking, quite frankly, kind of wan and withered and things like that. The HCG diet did not do that for me, and so I love it. And as maintenance, though, I'm basically staying on low glycemic, healthy protein, healthy fats diet.
And the HCG diet, those are usually in a liquid. It's a liquid product?
I actually used an injectable, which can only be gotten by prescription. But you can also use, there are HCG drops out there. Now, I was challenged on this. They sometimes are termed homeopathic drops.
Yes.
I guess they're not homeopathic in the strict sense, because they're not inoculating you against obesity, really. But it's stimulating the HCG response in the body. Now, the FDA did kind of go after some people and scared a few people. It is still available out there and quite widely, and honestly, I don't know the quality of some of the products that are out there. I would research it carefully if you're considering taking those, because some of them just simply don't work. And of course, the FDA likes to say that homeopathics don't work, and that because they don't have any active ingredient in them, and that's because they don't understand homeopathics.
Right. Well, one thing I do know about homeopathic medicines is that they are regulated by the Food and Drug Administration as drugs, and they have been so since 1938, and that's why they are called homeopathic medicines and have on the labels exactly what they do. So that's why they're so clear. But when you chatted with us, for those of you just tuning in today to Here's to Your Health, we're speaking with Kathleen Barnes, the author. You used an injectable, so obviously that is a medicine. But the stuff that you can buy at a natural food store, I'm assuming that it's not the same product. How could it be?
It is not the same product, and like I said, it's been promoted as a homeopathic, and it is not technically a homeopathic.
Correct. Yes.
And there are so many different ones. I don't really know what the different ones contain, but I do coaching and weight control coaching as well as life coaching, and I have certainly had clients who have shed a great amount of weight, including one that got rid of 100 pounds using the drops exclusively. So they certainly do work.
Wow. Okay, so that is impressive. So you have direct experience with it, and you have done enough research to write a book, obviously, on it. So you think that the HCG diet does have merit?
Oh, absolutely. And as I said, I modified it. The book was called the Super Simple HCG Diet, and it's still available. And I made it what I thought was reasonable. I think when Simeon's was Dr. Simeon's, who formulated the book back in the 1950s, there were a lot of restrictions on it that just weren't necessary. I mean, including, I'm sorry, I'm a woman of a certain age, and to tell me that I can't use any moisture on my skin, it's not going to happen.
Right.
But that's what he said. He said, you can't use any moisturizer because that's going to absorb the fats through your skin and things like that. And he had a very limited number of fruits, limited list of fruits and vegetables that you could eat. And I found that all low glycemic fruits and vegetables were absolutely fine, and not more than 2 servings of fruit a day. and but really measuring the amount of protein and weighing. I had a food scale and I weighed it, and all of those things are what caused it to be successful. And I made a couple of little adaptations because I knew, for example, I wanted my half and half in my coffee in the morning. I was fine with 1 cup, and that was okay. And I was okay with using stevia in it and all of that. But I was not going to give up my coffee. That was a deal breaker for me.
I see.
So I would measure out a tablespoon of half and half in my coffee, and I would really enjoy it.
All righty. Kathleen, because you have 19 books, and one of the books that I very much enjoyed when it came out was your book on thyroid. And as I remember, that book on thyroid, within the circle I ran, had kind of a big impact. Can you briefly, we have a few minutes left, can you please comment on thyroid and energy and mood and weight loss, if you can swing all that?
Oh, okay. I wrote it a while ago, so let me see if I can delve down in my brain and get that back. But basically, the thyroid is the master gland of the body that tells the whole metabolism what to do. And so, and particularly as we age, and particularly for women, and there probably is a relationship to estrogen production and progesterone production. I don't know that anybody has really put a really strong definition on that yet. But as we age, our thyroid function tends to fall off. And about 40% of women over the age of 40 have low thyroid function or hypothyroidism. It's quite difficult to get diagnosed with that because the standards are so low, and conventional medicine has, like it does in many things, it has these opinions that aren't necessarily based on fact at all about thyroid function.
Right.
And if you do a basic thyroid function test, it'll come back, for most people, for probably about 80% of people, it will come back, oh, everything's fine. No, you're tired, you can't lose weight, your hair's falling out, all of those things, but that doesn't have anything to do with your thyroid. Likely it does. And even the American and Society of Endocrinologists, that's probably not the correct term for them, have lowered those standards, but a lot of doctors aren't even aware of that. So having low thyroid function and exposure to toxins in our environment and so forth has caused thyroid function to be lower. I suspect probably the standard American diet affects it as well. I suspect that mineral deficiencies have a role as well. And so our low thyroid function causes a whole list of symptoms that basically make us overweight, tired, and all of the things that are very unpleasant. And just getting thyroid function back to normal is a really good, a really easy way of dealing with it.
And so we're speaking with Kathleen Barnes, the author of a number of important books on wellness. If you wanted to improve thyroid function, what is your suggestion? What foods can I eat? What supplements?
Here's an interesting one. If you're undergoing any of those symptoms, the weight gain that you can't seem to get down, the tiredness, the dry hair, the being cold, that's another thing. Somebody said to me, do you wear socks to bed? And I said, always. How do you know? That's a sign of low thyroid.
Okay.
Cold feet. And so, being aware that you have all those things, this is a really simple technique that was taught to me by a chiropractor. And that is just taking, where your thyroid is. Your thyroid is just on either side of your windpipe on your neck. It's a butterfly-shaped gland, and you need to do it with both sides. But he just taught me to gently tap. I'm doing it right now. I don't know if you can hear it through the phone. Just very gently tap on there, almost like EFT type techniques on both sides. Do it 10 times on one side, 10 times on the other side. Do that for a minute or two a day to literally wake up your thyroid and tell it to, get going again. I found that had a really powerful effect on my energy levels.
Really?
Now, I do take thyroid hormone now. I take a natural one called Nature Throid. There's another one that's pretty commonly in use also. It's called Armor Thyroid.
Yes.
Those you need to have a prescription for. A lot of functional medicine specialists and integrative practitioners are very conscious of this, and they're willing to do it. And a lot of them will actually even let you sort of, as they call it, titrate it, or take a small amount and see if that helps your symptoms, and if it doesn't, a little bit more until you get relief.
I see. Well, Kathleen Barnes, it has been a great pleasure having you speak with us today on Here's to Your Health. How can my listeners contact you?
Oh, you can contact me very easily through my website, which is just KathleenBarnes.com, or you can email me directly if you'd like, and that's Kathleen at KathleenBarnes.com, and it's spelled Kathleen.
Very good. We've been speaking with Kathleen Barnes, the author of 19 important wellness books. I'm your host, Joshua Lane. You're listening to us today on the LA Talk Live television network. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back after these important messages.
Hi, this is Dr. Levi, your fitness doctor, making a personal house call, inviting you to join me Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific for my all-new show, The Dr. Levi Show. Join us as we discuss fitness, health, and well-being, including emotional and spiritual health. So don't forget to tune in to The Dr. Levi Show every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, exclusively on latalklive.com and the Talk Live Broadcast Network. You can also catch us on iTunes, Radio R&B, or watch us on Ustream.tv, or catch us on the Live 365 network, and now on Radio Flag and Stitcher Radio. Reality radio handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk.
People, it's Jennifer Tapier from StarCam. You guys might know me from the red carpet, catching up with all the stars, but guess what? We're bringing the red carpet to the radio right out here on LA Talk Live. I'm going live Thursday nights at 6 p.m. We got hot topics, celebrities, and much more. We were featured on Chloe Lamar on E!, Howard Stern, T.I.'s Family Hustle. You know how we do. So check it out on Thursday nights, 6 p.m. All things Hollywood, everything celebrity. StarCam Radio?
StarCam Radio? StarCam Radio!
Oh yeah, follow us on Twitter at StarCam Radio.
Hi, this is Dawn Christie inviting you to join me every Friday, 1 p.m. Pacific for my all-new show, The Dawn Christie Show. Join me as I discuss love, spiritual readings, your purpose, why am I born, what am I here to do. So don't forget to tune in The Dawn Christie Show at 1 p.m. Pacific, exclusively on LA Talk Live. You can also catch us on iTunes, Radio R&B, or watch us on Ustream TV, reality radio, handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk.
Joshua Lane, member of the board of directors of Dr. Ann Wigmore's Hippocrates Health Institute, Josh Lane was part of the Dr. Ann Wigmore team that brought wheatgrass, sprouts, and raw foods to a worldwide audience. And now the host of Here's to Your Health on LA Talk Live, Joshua Lane.
We're back. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Here's to Your Health on the LA Talk Live television network. I'm your host, Joshua Lane. And my next guest is a teacher of pranayama, or breath, teaches wellness, Surendra Mehta. has been a guest on my show several times. Did I pronounce your name correctly at least once this time?
Yes.
Very good.
Yes.
Surendra, thank you for being on my show today.
Thank you for having me back.
My pleasure. So, for the audience, would you please define for us what pranayama means?
Pranayama is a very, very old yoga science, part of the yoga science. Prana means the vital force, and ayama means to expand. So our body has a vital force, and how can we keep that vital force which makes our body tick, each and every system of our body tick? That's the science behind pranayama.
I see. And what do you teach a student? What are some of the basic things that you would tell a student?
First of all, when we start teaching a student, we first of all show them how to breathe correctly. We show them how to train, how they have to train their lungs so that they can take the breath to each and every 3 sections of the lungs. And that is the first part. And the reason we teach them how to breathe correctly, or how to breathe more efficiently, if I may say that, is that as we breathe in the amount of air, we are breathing in the amount of oxygen along with it. So the better we breathe, the better and the larger quantity of oxygen we can take it into the lungs for it to transfer to the bloodstream through the transfer process.
Yes.
And once we show them how to do that, then we show them the pranayama techniques. And pranayama, there are 3 pranayama techniques that we show to most of my clients, but there are other techniques which are very, very specific. There are 8 systems in our body. I will name just few of them. It's the circulatory system.
Yes.
It's the respiratory system, digestive and excretory system, very, very important, endocrine system, and the nervous system. So these pranayama techniques, different techniques address the different systems of the body. For example, Anulom Vilom, which is also known as the alternate nostril breathing, it addresses the nervous system and it also addresses the endocrine system. For example, as we all know, stress is one of the major talk that everyone in the health field, they talk about it.
Yes.
If you look at the Vedas, or if you look at the old scriptures from India, the scriptures and the talks by yogis, they talk about stress, the root cause of all diseases.
I see.
And for example, the Anulom Vilom, or the alternate nostril breathing, is the technique which helps to reduce stress. Just by doing that practice, it reduces stress. For example, or actually giving you just a little bit about what Anulom Vilom is, or alternate nostril breathing is. You breathe through the left nostril and you breathe out through the right nostril. Then you breathe in from the right nostril and breathe out from the left nostril. By just doing that process for 5 to 15 minutes, depending on what we are trying to address in terms of the issues of the body, it helps both the nervous system and the endocrine system.
And that alternate nostril breathing, do you want to show us the technique on camera? Or
yes, I could show that. It's a very simple technique. We ask our clients to sit straight, in a chair, or they can sit on the floor if they can sit in the cross-leg position. And there are many different positions they can sit in, but the main requirement is that your back should be straight. As your back is straight, you close the right nostril with the thumb, and then breathe in from the left, for example, And then we close the left nostril with the 2 fingers or 1 finger. And I'm taking my hand down so that everyone can see it.
Yes.
I breathe out from the right nostril. And then I breathe in from the right nostril. Close the right nostril and breathe out from the left nostril. So this is called 1 cycle. So it takes about 6 to 7 seconds to do 1 cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, a person would breathe 10 to 15 times. There are 2 aspects of getting the benefit to the body through the alternate nostril breathing. One is we breathe per minute slower than what we normally breathe.
Yes.
The slower you breathe, the more healthier life you're going to have. And I'm not sure how far it is correct, but the scriptures say, for example, a tortoise, it breathes once only a minute. 1 time a minute it breathes in and out, that 1 cycle. And we all know how long a turtle lives.
Yes.
And we also know that a dog breathes the maximum number of times in a minute. And we all know the kind of life that a dog has.
Yes.
So just that's one of the side benefit of doing any kind of pranayama practice. So that was just one example. For example,
And that was called what again?
It's called the alternate nostril breathing, or anulom vilom.
And Anulom Vilom, that is what language?
It's a Sanskrit word,
Sanskrit.
anulom vilom.
Right.
Yes.
And really, in your opinion, this technique is several thousand years old for sure. Is that it?
Yes. Yes. It is at least 2,500 years old that we know the Vedas are and the other scriptures are, there where there is a mention about this. Avatavahi Beshjam is in Sanskrit word, in a Sanskrit verse, which means that this is the panacea of health. Pranayama is a panacea of health. So you can imagine, and this has been practiced many years. For example, in my coaching, people who have migraine headaches, people who have diabetes, we recommend this very much, this particular practice, along with many other practices. So this is just one example of one kind of pranayama. For example, thyroid. Thyroid is a very much found nowadays. In the medical field, it's talked about it.
Sure.
Very simple technique of a pranayama, and which I would like to demonstrate.
Certainly.
And you can really see what I'm doing, but you can hear what we do. We call a pranayama, it's called Ujjayi pranayama. It's not Ujjayi breath, but it's called Ujjayi pranayama because we use the Ujjayi breath. Ujjayi means a warrior's way of breathing.
Ujjayi, warrior.
Ujjayi. Warriors always, whenever they want to attack somebody, you might have heard them, they just breathe in very deep, like, and then they will throw the arrow, or they will do whatever else they need to do, like. So that sound, we teach them how to activate their thyroid through that process of Ujjayi pranayama, and I will do just one round of the Ujjayi pranayama. It will be breathing as if we are sipping the air from the pit of the throat, and that makes a noise. And by that, we vibrate the thyroid and the parathyroid, and that's what, whether you have a hypothyroid or the other one, it helps in both ways. Whether the thyroid is low or it's high, it helps for both processes. And let me demonstrate that to you. What I demonstrated here was I filled my lung by making that sound. That means I was breathing the air from the pit of my throat, and I was actually activating the thyroids and the parathyroids. And then the last part that I showed was I just held my breath just for a few seconds. In fact, you should be, if you can, we take our chin close to the pit of the throat just to hold the breath in. But people who have issues with the heart and other problems, we do not recommend holding the breath at all. So what we recommend is that you close the right nostril and breathe through the left nostril. And in most cases, like as I mentioned during the Anulom Vilom or the alternate nostril breathing, we started with the left nostril and we finished with the left nostril.
Yes.
The main reason for that is as soon as you breathe in from the left nostril, the right side of the brain, which is the active side which makes you do things, activates. And we always want to start with activating the body, and then we breathe in through the right nostril, it slows the body down. So we always want to keep a balance. For example, we always say, I see so-and-so person being very balanced. That means they're both sides of the brain, the active side of the brain, as well as the thinking and the very calm side of the brain. They are both kind of in sync, close to 50-50. And those are the people who can take decisions, who can make decisions in those situations, which are very difficult situations. When we come across a very serious problem, when we see something very serious, that's the time all these pranayama techniques, which work on the different systems of the body, they help. Giving you an example about, let's say, diabetes.
Yes.
I was declared diabetic in 2005.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
My blood sugar was close to 207 at that time. And I was shocked. I never thought that I had any kind of, blood sugar problem.
And were you the same weight you are now?
Not really. My weight was, I generally say that I was more than 50 pounds heavier than what it is right now.
Oh, okay.
But in fact, I was 80 to 90 pounds heavier than what you see me today.
Oh, I see.
And because of that sugar problem, I had other problems also, a little high blood pressure, and I always used to be stressed, getting angry, and so on. So when I learned about the sugar, my mother had sugar, my two sisters have, my aunts, they had sugar. And I was scared because my mother, she had a very miserable life the last 3 or 4 years. So I really wanted to take control of it.
Right.
So I started looking at different things, what will help me, how can I reduce weight, what can I do, other things. So I traveled to India for almost like 3 years. And I gathered a lot of the information. And that's the time I understood the real meaning of pranayama, even though I was practicing yoga from 1994, but I did not understand the meaning of what pranayama is. And I came across a teacher called Swami Ramdev, and he is the world's #1 pranayama teacher at this time. He has, I would not like to use the word cured, but he has helped people to go back to the normal condition, not only for diabetes, thyroid, and many, many other problems. And I follow his system. I'm not a medical practitioner. I'm a yoga therapist. I'm a yoga therapist from Loyola Marymount University. I'm a certified yoga therapist.
Oh, I see.
And I'm close to 69 years old now. And just last year, I finished my 3 years program at Loyola Marymount University because I wanted to have some credentials from one of the recognized universities in U.S., even though I've been practicing pranayama and other yoga techniques for a long time.
That was probably a good idea.
It definitely has helped me a lot. I can now speak to my clients when I do the coaching. They recognize it that I have gone through a very rigorous training along with my practice for a very, very long time.
And what was the name of the teacher of pranayama that you studied with in India?
Swami Ramdev.
Let me have that again.
Swami Ramdev.
And he's still practicing?
He is still practicing, and he holds camps where up to 6,000 people in one sitting go and practice with him.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And they do it in the camps, and they also have a hall near Haridwar where they can accommodate over 3,000 people in that big hall. It's over 125,000 square feet hall where they practice. It's about a 2 hours yoga program for 7 days they practice it. And I have been personally trained by Swami Ramdev in this particular practice.
And let me ask you a very obvious question. When we breathe, it's always proper to breathe through the nose, and mouth breathing is very bad. Is that correct?
Well, if a person is healthy, they will automatically breathe through their nose if they have not created a bad habit of breathing through their mouth. I'm glad you brought this up. There are 2 or 3 techniques only in pranayama where we tell people to breathe through the mouth. For example, summer is coming.
Yes.
First of all, answering your question, it is bad because it is bad breathing through the mouth. Not being a medical professional, but I know that people who breathe through the mouth, they have a different balance and ratio of the carbon dioxide and the oxygen in their body. And the moment they start breathing through their nose, that ratio gets corrected quite a bit. And there is a lot of research, and I'm doing the research also. I just started doing the research through the different papers, talking to my teachers, different teachers in India, as well as here, that what is the relation of carbon dioxide that keeps the body, fit. There is a function for it. And too low of a carbon dioxide is not very good. So breathing through the mouth. Summer is coming now, and I want to tell you a very simple practice that one can cool themselves. If it's very hot, you don't have access to the air conditioner, there is a very simple technique that we teach. And there are 2 techniques. There are some people, they can't mold their tongue like a beak. So there is another technique. So I'll go through the first technique, which is called Shitali Pranayama.
Shitali Pranayama.
Shitali Pranayama. Shitali is the actual Sanskrit word. Shitali means the one that cools. So I'm going to show you that on the camera, how we make our tongue. We make our tongue into a beak and then breathe through the mouth and finish. After we finish breathing in, then we breathe out from the nostrils.
Yes.
Okay? No matter how much heat you feel in the body, the heat will start coming down if you breathe with this particular technique. There are many people, 1 in every 10,000, 15,000 people, they can't do this with their tongue. So we have another technique. We close
and excuse me, what you just did, so that, what's that called again?
Shitli. Shitli, or here in America, I pronounce it Shitali. So that it's very much familiar with the American folks who practice pranayama.
And that is a cooling technique.
That's a cooling technique.
And how long does that take to work?
Well, it works immediately, and we recommend in summertime to practice 5 to 7 times only. In other words, one round that I showed you, just practice 5 to 7 rounds at a time. After 2 hours, 3 hours, you can practice again. But in wintertime, and people who have asthma or any kind of lung disease or lung issues in their body, we do not recommend that because it cools the body, even though we don't feel that cooling in the lungs as such, but the whole body gets cooled. It's a very unique technique. And those who cannot fold their tongue, we call another technique. It's shitkari. Shitkari is the alternate to the Shitli pranayama, and this is how it's practiced. We bring our teeth together and breathe through the teeth. We can hold the breath if we are healthy, or it's recommended for some For some people, it's not recommended to hold the breath. Now, apart from the cooling benefits of Shitkari pranayama, it helps the gum. In fact, some of the gum issues can be corrected with this. Pyorrhea, bad breath. There are many issues that, the teeth-related issues and the mouth-related issues that can be corrected with that. So these are just some of the examples. There is another pranayama which is very beneficial for the body, and we recommend it very cautiously because people can overdo it. We call it the Kapalabhati pranayama.
Kapalabhati.
Yeah, that means shining the skull. It's so powerful pranayama that people who practice it, their forehead is always shining. That means they have so much of energy within their body.
Oh, that's nice.
And it helps. For example, it helps in diabetes. It helps in digestive system. There are certain situations that we do not recommend that. For example, we don't recommend it. We tell the pregnant ladies not to practice it. People who have colitis, for example, we don't recommend it. People who have constipation, we recommend it very highly, provided they don't have any other issues that interfere with it.
And that shining skull is, again, that just makes me more alert.
That makes you more alert. It also reduces weight. So it actually works on the middle part of the body, which is the belly button and around it, all that fat, and it activates that. It activates the colon, small intestine. It helps to absorb more of the vitamins and minerals. Let's say if somebody is taking the vitamins, it will help to absorb those vitamins because it strengthens the small intestines and it helps in excretion. That means the getting rid of, the bad stuff that our body does not require through the urination process or the excretion process.
Sounds good. For those of you just tuning in to this edition of Here's to Your Health on the LA Talk Live television network, my guest is Surendra Mitra, who is a teacher of pranayama, been a guest on my show many times. We're talking about shining skull, which is always a great name for a breathing technique. I remember studying that years ago. I know Yogi Bhajan used to teach that shining skull, and students really seem to. I took several classes, and those were fun. What other techniques do you have for me for breath? And also, once again, so if I breathe through the nose, this is a sign. This is not good. And so is that the first thing you try to correct when you're working with the students?
Yeah, we first tell them not to breathe through the mouth.
Right. Sorry, not the mouth, right?
Yeah, breathe through the nose only. Mm-hmm. But there are techniques, and the old scriptures and the yogis, they devised electromechanical gestures of the fingers. We call it mudras.
Mudras.
So, mudras. As we teach pranayama, we also teach the mudra. For example, by holding the tip of the first finger with the tip of the thumb,
yes,
that calms your mind. And while you're practicing pranayama practices, it helps.
So the reason for these, let me use the word gesture.
Yes.
What is this called again?
Mudra.
This is the mudra.
M-U-D-R-A-S.
And what is the physiological purpose?
The physiological purpose is that these immediately, depending on what finger we touch with the thumb, you will find that there is a connection to the different nerves and what we call nadis. Nadis are not nerves.
What's the term?
Nadi, N-A-D-I-S.
Yes.
Those are the passages that actually carry the vital force.
Yes.
We have nerves, we have arteries, veins, but these nadis are like the meridians. Those are the passages. It's just like the airway. There is no road in the airway. So same way our body has what is called the nadis, and it is those nadis when they are healthy and when there is no blockage in the nadis, then we can take that energy which we get it from by taking the oxygen and the exchange process. But that vital energy is the most important part.
Actually, excuse me, this has been a very good conversation, but you just made, I thought, a very nice statement. The air has no What was the term you used?
The airways.
The airways, yeah.
Yeah, the airways where the planes go by. There are no roads.
Right.
But they are very important for having the transportation of the planes through the sky.
Well, it makes perfect sense to me. So you're saying that these gestures influence circulation of oxygen and nutrients?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That makes
For
sense.
example, there's one gesture where we take the tip of the first finger, put it at the root of the thumb, and then we touch the tip of the first middle two fingers with the thumb itself. If this is how it is, and the little finger is straight. This is called the heart mudra, for the heart.
Okay.
And just by sitting in this position, one can strengthen their heart.
Wow.
And as we teach them one of the practices, we tell them to sit in this position so that they can take a lot of breath and a lot of oxygen. And while they're processing their oxygen through the lungs, they're also getting the benefit of strengthening their heart. So Bhastrika is one of the pranayama which helps people to take a lot of air into the body. It helps the asthmatics, but we tell them different mudras, for example, to sit in that. Now, here is another very...
Excuse me. For my listeners today listening to me on iTunes,
Yes.
Listening to us today at work rather than watching us, can you please describe to me the hand position, finger position for this mudra for the heart? Would you please describe
Okay.
to me? Yeah.
You take the tip of the first finger or
Yes.
the index finger and put it at the root of the thumb.
Yes.
And then you take the tip of the thumb and touch the middle finger and the ring finger. These three tips, the tip of the thumb and the tip of the middle finger and the ring finger is touching, and the tip of the first finger or the index finger is at the root of the thumb.
Yes.
And that itself helps a lot. Here in America, we are not supposed to touch anybody if somebody has a heart problem and they're feeling really bad.
Right.
But in India, it's not that regulated. So anytime we see somebody going into the heart attack or having a heart problem, if somebody knows these techniques, they make their two hands go into this particular mudra, for example. I would not recommend anybody to do that here. I will not suggest anybody, but I'm just saying what happens in the olden days. They could actually control this. Sometimes the heart goes out of sync, they suggest that. But here, whatever the medical doctors would suggest, that what I would say that one should do.
And this heart mudra, what's the name of this again?
This is called the Hriday mudra or heart mudra. Hriday means heart.
In Sanskrit.
In Sanskrit.
Okay.
And it's very powerful mudra. And not only that, if you're feeling sleepy at night, well, let's say you're coming back from your friend's house, you're sleepy, not because of the alcohol, but otherwise you're sleepy. If you make this mudra, you will feel very active. You sit in this mudra for 2 to 3 minutes before you sit behind the wheel. Hopefully it'll help you, but I can't promise you that it will.
Well, if these certainly are graceful gestures anyway, and kind of exciting. What else? What other mudras do you have for me?
One of the mudra which I recommend very, very highly, people who are taking a lot of drugs. When I say drugs, means the medicines.
Medicines, yeah.
Okay. If you hold the tip of the thumb with the tip of the middle finger and the ring finger, just by sitting in this particular mudra, the toxins in your body, they get out.
So we're saying the two middle fingers.
The two middle fingers and the other two fingers, the index finger and the little finger being straight.
And what does this do for me?
This eliminates the toxins from your body.
Okay.
So while we are doing Kapalabhati pranayam, which helps in reducing the toxins also, helps in reducing the fat, we recommend that they sit in this mudra, depending on, who I'm coaching.
And what does this do for me again?
This reduces the toxins within your body, from your body. Eliminates the toxins.
I can see dancers learning all this because it's just very graceful, no doubt from stage. Probably looks very nice.
So, well, actually dancing, for example, Bharatanatyam dancing, or any of the Indian dances, especially Bharatanatyam, they make gestures with the fingers.
Yes, they do. Yes.
And with the hands. And it is the reason for that is as they make those gestures, it reflects on their face and it connects to their body. And that connection, when they display to the audience gets the very similar effect of that. And depending on who is paying attention to it.
Right.
Okay. And those are these gestures are very, very powerful. There are other gestures which can increase just by sitting in that particular mudra. It can increase the strength in your body. For example, the tip of the little finger with the tip of the ring finger and the tip of the thumb. That by itself just energizes your body.
I see.
And while we teach different pranayamas, we also tell them the gestures so that they can get the benefit. The last mudra that we teach very much, people who have arthritis, is very common right now. And this mudra, we take the tip of the first finger at the root of the thumb, and then press the thumb on top of the finger, and that is for arthritis.
I see.
Yeah, just by sitting in this particular position for half an hour, not even breathing, they say that scriptures say that it helps in eliminating the arthritis.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
That's certainly very good to hear. And once again, please let me just get the name of that teacher of yours in India.
Swami Ramdev.
And Surendra, where do you practice? How can we get in contact with you?
Okay, I practice at home myself, and I do one-on-one coaching. And my phone number is 909 437 4240. And I do not advertise. It's just by word of mouth that people come to me. I have done few workshops through the extension program of Loyola Marymount University. Dr. Larry Payne, he is very helpful to me, and he is the director of the yoga therapy program at LMU. And I'm also a mentor for the yoga therapy students at LMU, where I teach the teachers who are going to become the teachers of yoga therapy, and they are yoga teachers. I teach them the pranayama techniques.
And again, you also mentioned earlier in the conversation that you graduated their 3-year program at Loyola Marymount University.
Yes, that is correct.
And where is that university?
That university is in Los Angeles.
And that's a Jesuit school.
Loyola, yes. But
it's been around a long time. It's been around a long time.
It's been around a long time. They have extension programs which teach yoga, Buddhist philosophy, Indian philosophy. They have actually started a master's program also in yoga. And very powerful programs in the extension part of the university.
Well, that sounds like a nice thing for them to be doing. Seems like a smart thing. And are those programs well attended?
Yes, they are. And they are becoming more and more popular. For example, when I started, there were just in the mid 25 students, like 25, 30 students, and now they have classes up to 40, 45 students, and it's becoming very, very popular program.
So once again, just give us your contact information.
Okay, my phone number is 909 437 4240.
Very good, thank you. You're listening to Here's to Your Health on the LA Talk Live television network. I'm your host, Josh Lane. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back after these important messages.
Hi, this is Starlet Quarles, and I'm inviting you to join us every Wednesday from 5 to 6 p.m. for a new show right here on LA Talk Live, The Dialogue, Real Talk, Real People. Join us as we discuss the topics that are relevant to today's generational leaders. So don't forget to tune in to The Dialogue, Real Talk, Real People, every Wednesday from 5 to 6 p.m. right here on latalklive.com. You can also catch us on iTunes Radio R&B, Live 365, Radio Flag, and now Stitcher Radio. Or watch and listen directly at latalklive.com. Reality radio handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk.
Hello, I'm Joel Ramirez.
And I'm Lolita Robinson Coppage, and welcome to Joy in My House
on LATalkLive.com. Inspirational radio
with a touch of recovery.
A reality show where nothing is left unsaid
and no one is insignificant who says it.
Exclusively on LATalkLive.com. You can also catch us on iTunes Radio R&B or watch us on Ustream TV.
Reality radio handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk.
Hi, I'm Ro Williams, and I would like to invite you to join GospelRhythms.com every Sunday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our show, GospelRhythms.com Talk Live Radio. Join us as we celebrate Christians around the world in all genres of entertainment, as well as highlight interest stories on men and women who are making a difference and impacting their community. So don't forget to tune in to GospelRhythms.com Talk Live Radio, exclusively on LATalkLive.com. You can also catch us on iTunes under R&B or watch us live on Ustream TV. We are reality radio, handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is GospelRhythms.com Talk Live Radio on LATalkLive.com. We're more than just talk. We're heaven's party here on earth.
Joshua Lane, member of the board of directors of Dr. Ann Wigmore's Hippocrates Health Institute, Josh Lane was part of the Dr. Ann Wigmore team that brought wheatgrass, sprouts, and raw foods to a worldwide audience. And now the host of Here's to Your Health on LA Talk Live, Joshua Lane.
We're back. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Here's to Your Health on the LA Talk Live television network. I'm your host, Joshua Lane, and my co-host, Dr. Hans Kugler, Ph.D., author of the first book on anti-aging in 1971, is with us today. Hans, welcome.
Thank you. Always good to be here.
Now, during the past week, we've been chatting off the air, and you mentioned that a very important event has just occurred at the University of Oregon, a new study. Would you like to just tell us about that?
Okay, it's just absolutely, totally fascinating and boosts my morale and everything else. Well, it goes back about 6 or 7 years when we were talking about stem cells. And everybody who was talking about stem cells and doing research in it, some people were saying, oh, you're a bad guy because you're killing embryos, and the religious arguments were opposed to it, and so on and so on.
Yes, I remember that. Yes, I do.
Okay, that. Now, at that time, a Japanese professor, Hayakawa, came in with a method called IPS, induced pluripotent stem cells. Now, what he did was he takes retroviruses. Those are the viruses that insert themselves into your DNA, in your genetic material, and they never go away. You know, some of the herpes and some of the severe viruses and so on.
Yes.
But he takes a retrovirus, actually 4 of them, and each one with a different control gene attached to it, and inserts it into a skin cell of you. Now, and then the cell is supposed to behave like a stem cell. It's not a stem cell, but it behaves like a stem cell, like triggering reactions in your body. Well, there was a big discussion going on. At that time, there were 5 people giving lectures. I was one of them. Professor Taraskin, my genius mentor from many years ago. Alabama University School of Medicine was in there and so on. And after each one of us gave our talk, we were sitting on the stage, and we had about 600 or 800 MDs, PhDs, professors in the audience. They could ask us questions, right?
And where was this lecture?
I think it was in Houston. I'm not really quite sure where it was.
Yeah.
But anyway, the bottom line this was, because I know laboratory procedures. I know what I can do in a laboratory. See, a lot of people talk about things, but they have no lab experience, and that's really the critical point. And I basically stated, I said, look, if you take 4 retroviruses and you're supposed to put them into your skin cell, what happens if 5 of them get in there, right? I mean, 2 of the same retrovirus get in there, or only 3, and blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
You can't really mechanically do that. You can't take a single cell under a microscope and insert 4 retrovirus. It doesn't work, right? So anyway, so I said, this method is very interesting scientifically, but it will definitely not be the method for making human stem cells. The method for human stem cells is called the nuclear transfer method. That means you take a donated female egg cell, which is somewhat a joke anyway, because women really don't really donate things. You know, I mean, 4 egg cells cost $10,000. I mean, where's the donation in that one, right?
Oh, I did not know that. Okay.
Well, anyway, and now you remove, under a fancy microscope, you remove the nucleus, which makes it you. And then I take a nucleus from your, or the person who needs stem cells,
yes,
from one of the skin cells or a fibroblast or anything like this, and I put it into the cell, right? I remove the DNA, and I put the other DNA in there, and then I trigger the cell to divide. That's a little bit of a critical step. We've done a lot of work along those lines. But anyway, if the cell starts dividing, that's called mitosis. Mm-hmm. On day number 4, it's called the blastocyst stage. A little sac forms in that developing cellular mass, and that contains now stem cells with your DNA. Now, we remove them separately, cultivate them away from the controlling DNA to about 10 or 11 millions, and then implant them into you or whoever needs the cells, right?
I implant them how, by the way?
It's relatively simple. You could actually do it IV or into the lymph or whatever. I mean,
all right, I did not know.
It's a relatively simple method, right? Has been done on the animal experience with rhesus monkeys and, tested on specific animal projects, see the effectiveness of those cells. And it was absolutely magnificent. That is the way to go. And I explained that. And I said, look, nuclear transfer is the method to make stem cells and not that IPS. And people objected to it. There was actually a guy from Denmark. Oh, that little blank knew everything, right? But anyway, he looked at me and he says, where did you get your degree from, right? And Professor Taraska from Alabama University, the man, I mean, everybody knew him. He's a genius. He looks at me, he says, Hans, can I tell him? He was grinning, right? And I said, yes, Sherry, go ahead. And he turned around to the guy and he says, Hans got his Ph.D. from Stony Brook, Stony Brook, which is now recognized as one of the top schools, if not the top school, in the biomedical physiology, biochemistry sciences, right? And the guy was ready to crawl under the table. But
good.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So, drug industries, when you ask them, are you doing stem cell research? Oh, yes, we are doing. We are doing IPS, induced pluripotent stem cells. Yes, you can find lots of interesting factors, but it doesn't work out to make stem cells. But in the meantime, they can say, oh, yes, we were doing a lot of research, we're getting fantastic results. Parenthesis, in the meantime, and in the meantime, we're going to keep you sick, coming and paying, right? That's the basic idea. But anyway,
excuse me. So your contention here is that while they're doing interesting science, they kind of know, or maybe they don't know, but that it's not going to lead to any kind of breakthrough. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, right.
Because at this point, it's just too difficult to implement this kind of science.
Right.
And what is your method called?
Nuclear transfer. It's not mine.
That's right.
Several researchers have done this. It's just a common sense approach when you're a laboratory guy. You know what
well,
you
if
can do.
yes,
with,
thank you for if you're a laboratory man. Okay, so let me have the name of that method again.
Nuclear transfer.
And you said that what? Last week, the University of Oregon said what?
They published data in the journal Cell, and they demonstrated that with several different people and different oocytes, that means X cells, they were able to do the nuclear transfer and make stem cells, and they tested the stem cells, comparative DNA. Everything is just magnificent. I mean, it basically confirms what I and some other people were saying, and and then still it goes back to the religious arguments, right? Because people say, well, if you do that, you're destroying an embryo. No, we're not really destroying an embryo. And by the way, also, a lot of us feel that it was the drug companies that fueled the religious arguments, right?
By giving them funding?
By bad-mouthing people who were doing this, I mean, so anyway, so there's a lot of opinions about that. But whatever. The fact is, it's now been demonstrated, published in very much detail, that nuclear transfer is most likely the method to make human embryonic stem cells. And they identified them. Like, for example, if I use your DNA, put it into a denucleated X cell, and I make stem cells, how can I tell if this really works, right? I mean, if this is
How can you tell?
Well, when if you watch shows like NCIS or something like this, it always comes up,
right.
DNA analysis, right? DNA analysis showed this and this. Well, the DNA has actually tremendous number of bands in there. They only pick on a number of small bands to show, for example, this guy is a father, or this guy originated with some tissues, and so on and so on. But there's also methods which are done. There's some here at UCLA and USC, people working on it, where you can look at literally every band in that.
Oh dear, Hans. Oh dear. Okay.
Anyway,
live television.
Anyway, and so you can actually identify the bands one after another, and it is 100% the same DNA.
All right. Now, since I am not a scientist, how do I, as the public, benefit from this new research? What do I get?
With all the problems in overall aging research, we should actually go back to Professor Emanuel Cheraskin, right?
Emanuel Cheraskin is an MD.
Alabama University School of Medicine, right. MD, Ph.D., DND, you name it, the degree he had it.
And you studied with Emanuel Cheraskin when?
Well, he was my mentor from somewhere 1976 through 88. And he once came to me when I gave a talk about my longevity studies that I did at Roosevelt University in Chicago. I was professor of chemistry there. And he said, Hans, you're basically doing the same thing, right? I mean, you are doing applications of all the good health practices versus all the bad health practices, and you're measuring lifespans. He says, and I define lifelong health as a state of homeostasis achieved by doing all these lifestyle and health practices correctly, right? So it's in essence the same. And we worked together. I mean, he guided me through some of the longevity studies. We had long discussions about it. I mean, if you're associated with a genius like this, I mean, it just gives you a boost. It's just unbelievable. Anyway, so Cheraskin defines lifelong health as a state of homeostasis achieved by doing all these lifestyles or health practices correctly, right? And that is basically what my book is all about, right? The lifelong health, learn how to control your genes to stay young with age. It's an ebook. Well,
what was that title once again?
Lifelong health, learn how to control your genes to stay young with age. And the key thing here is that we published it as an ebook. Well, why as an ebook? Because you can download it to your computer. It is much less expensive. This is a $20 book. And as an ebook with our nonprofit organization, we make it available for $7.55.
That's a great value.
It's an entire thesis, right? It covers the basics, the health practices, what we should be doing. And interestingly enough, as an ebook, if you list any references on your computer or on your reader, you can just click on it and you go, bang, you're back to the original paper that I quoted, right?
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
That is really fascinating, right?
Wow. I had no idea.
And then you go, reverse arrow and you're back to your manuscript, right? And you can read that. Like with what some people are doing when they buy an ebook, they print out one page, or one chapter, and they read it wherever they're going, right? Or when it's on their computer, on their reading device, an iPad or, whatever. The nice thing is, for me, especially as a scientist, I don't express opinions, scientific facts, documented and proven by scientific publications, right? And I quote those as proof of what I'm saying.
Yes.
And some other people who like to know more about that, you can just click on it, bang, and you're right back to the original paper, right?
Wow.
Like there was one very important publication. It really doesn't go into specific aging, but a very important factor in aging is cancer, right?
Yes.
I mean, because as we get older, directly proportional to the shriveling away of the thymus under your sternum, we have a increase in cancer. Well, there's a Professor Peter Duisberg in Berkeley.
Oh, Duisberg. Oh, yes.
I wish we could get him over here as a guest.
He's a retrovirologist, is he not? That's right.
He discovered oncogenes. He is totally opposed to the HIV/AIDS hypothesis, right?
Yes, I know he is, yes.
Which
I heard him lecture once at Nova University.
Yeah. As a matter, and Peter is a genius. You see, HIV/AIDS hypothesis totally violates any basic requirements for something to be a disease, like Koch's principles and so on, But anyway, he published the data saying, is carcinogenesis a form of speciation? I mean, he says when they do the chemotherapy, that chemotherapy changes a lot of cancer cells. They become their own little species, right? A different species. We used to say earlier that we had liver cancer and heart cancer and lung cancer and brain cancer, big deal, right? Do you know how many types of cancers we have today?
No.
57,000. And there's a database at NIH that confirms that, right? And so how can you develop a
Hans,
treatment?
I'd never heard that before. So you're saying that this was Peter Duisberg's thinking or research?
Right.
I see.
Proving, in essence, why we have so many different types of cancer, and basically why chemotherapy is just the biggest failure in the world, right? I mean, everybody knows that, right? And so
well, not everybody, but some people do know it. Some people do know it. Okay, Hans. For those of you just tuning in to Here's to Your Health on the LA Talk Live television network, we're speaking with Hans Kugler here on Here's to Your Health. Hans Kugler is a Ph.D. Let's go back to the University of Oregon study that came out last week.
Right.
The new method, or an improved method for stem cell. I use the word
preparation.
Preparation. Okay. So once again, what do I, as the public, get? What am I going to get over the next year or two or decade? What am I going to get?
Well, big question mark.
Yeah.
Because see, the drug industry is totally uninterested in that. Because if that method would be translated into treating people, it's relatively simple. It's estimated that it'll cost maybe $23,000 to make your own stem cells via this method. 95% of all the drugs out there would be totally outdated and worthless. So naturally, they don't like it. And that is one of the reasons why in other countries, Bangkok, right? I mean, I was in Thailand several times. Talking to people over there, they're building hospitals for the U.S. patients. Mexico City, they just built a big hospital in Tijuana, where Americans go over there and they get a much better health care than here in the U.S. Our healthcare system is so rotten, is so miserable, It is just amazing. And those people will most likely be the first ones to apply that method and, utilize it on you. I mean, and as predicted, those stem cells will roll over any disease like the cavalry.
Well, that's I don't quite understand that. You mean tell me that this stem cell research could help a person with diabetes or arthritis?
Anything. We're just totally back to normalizing things.
Whoa.
Right? Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, let me give you one example. Okay. In animals, you can use test animals, and chemically you can induce blindness. I mean, the animal doesn't see a thing.
In rabbits?
Anything. Rabbits, larger rats, and whatever. They're convenient to work with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when the animal is still young, they isolate from the blood stem cells. Those would be the same stem cells that we would be making in this thing. Okay, then they collect them. And then they induce blindness. And then they take a very fine needle, and with that very fine injection right through the lens into the retina, they put these stem cells in there, and within a couple of weeks, the animal sees again. Well,
really? And where's that been done?
That's I think there was a MIT and I don't know, some other university.
MIT, okay.
I have
MIT's,
the data in my book, right?
And what's the name of that book again?
But lifelong health, learn how to control your genes to stay young with age. I mean, it's a whole thesis. It shows everything from the health practices to stem cells to advanced things to weight loss and so on and so on, right? Anyway, now how even more important, you induce blindness in those animals, and then you take the stem cells and put them in intravenous. Anywhere in your body, and the stem cells know where to go and where to do the repairs.
Oh my goodness.
And the animal sees again.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, the background data is just magnificent. And what these Oregon researchers have done is they have actually pinpointed some little obstacles. And guess what? One of the key things, you would never guess that, but one of the key things that helps to keep those cells alive and functioning very well.
Tell me.
Caffeine.
What kind of caffeine?
Caffeine. Have a cup of coffee.
Oh my goodness. Coffee. What about green tea? Would that work just as good?
We don't know yet.
Okay, well, caffeine. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, well, it's something to know.
Anyway, this is just it's the most fascinating. It gives us such a boost in this, and in order to avoid to go next step further, to avoid more religious arguments. Scientists have used, and we did a little bit practice with that, to use animal egg cells as the egg cell into which we place the human DNA. And
what kind of animal?
And it
cell?
works. Rabbit,
really?
bovine.
That's safe?
Yeah. But I mean, at this point, when you use an animal egg cell like a rabbit egg cell, remove the nucleus, the same as in the other experiments, put your own DNA into a trigger to divide, and the resulting stem cells are literally 100% compatible with your DNA.
Wow.
Beautiful. They've done it in China. Actually, as a matter of fact, I communicated with those people for a long time, and suddenly they're off the screen. Nobody talks anymore. And through the
Chinese have been doing this?
Right. And through the grapevine, well, if you really needed stem cells today, you may go to China and you could probably get it done for $2.5 million. And that's sort of the rumor. I don't know. I haven't had it confirmed. But these people were very effective in making stem cells, compared the DNA, and it is exactly the DNA that you used, what you put into the nucleus. It's absolutely magnificent research.
Let me see if I'm following this. So theoretically, sometime in the future, in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years or 20 years from now, you'll be able to go to your physician's office and you'll get an injectable solution, and these stem cells will go where they're needed, or am I wrong in saying that?
Well, you'd have to make your own stem cells first.
Right. Make your own stem cells.
Individual.
Right.
And so on. They would actually take a donated female egg cell. They take a tissue sample from your body, right? And in a laboratory, they remove the nucleus from the donated egg cell, take a nucleus from your stem cell, from your skin cells or fibroblasts or any other cell, put it in there, trigger it to divide, and on day number 4, they isolate your stem cells from that, and they can apply that to you, and they will roll over any disease. That's a prediction.
All right. So then theoretically, my own stem cell will help me to cure myself of if I had arthritis or diabetes or anything else.
Totally.
Well, that's just...
Animal experiments already show it.
That's just remarkable. We're chatting with Dr. Hans Kugler, Ph.D., one of America's foremost scientists on longevity work. And you've been listening to us today on Here's to Your Health on the LA Talk Live television network. I'm your host, Josh Lane. We're going to take a short break, and then Dr. Hans Kugler will be back interviewing Dr. David Wong. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Angela DeJoseph. Join me Thursday evenings at 6 p.m. Pacific, The Angela DeJoseph Show. We're going to talk about health, wealth. We're going to share news, interviews, and entertainment. So don't forget to tune in to The Angela DeJoseph Show, Thursday evenings at 6 p.m. Pacific Time. You can also catch us on iTunes Radio, Radio Flag, TiVo Radio, and now live on Facebook. Watch and listen directly on latalklive.com. Reality radio handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk.
Hey guys, sick of all that top 40 music? Well, join me, Lixie the Engineer, and Mondo on our brand new show, Bandwidth Mondo, where we support sounds from the underground every Saturday with a new artist from 3 to 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So tune in to live in-studio performances, Q&As with the artists, drunken debauchery, and much more, exclusively here on LA Talk Live. We're more than just talk.
Joshua Lane, member of the board of directors of Dr. Ann Wigmore's Hippocrates Health Institute, Josh Lane was part of the Dr. Ann Wigmore team that brought wheatgrass, sprouts, and raw foods to a worldwide audience. And now the host of Here's to Your Health on LA Talk Live, Joshua Lane.
And welcome back to Here's to Your Health. My name is Dr. Hans Kugler, Ph.D. I'm the co-host with LA Talk Live, and I am so pleased today to have as my guest Dr. David Wong, one of the geniuses in my heart recovery, which we talked about many times before. You know, we talked about my extreme accident that induced heart problems and so on and so on. And David was one of the key people that I consulted with and, you know, guided me in the right direction, what to do, and so on and so on. And then there were lots of other people from Germany that helped. But anyway, the bottom line is I'm back. And everything works very nicely, past aviation medicals, flying airplanes, riding horses, and all that stuff, right? Dr. David Wong is an MD in the South Bay area in Torrance. As a matter of fact, to be a little bit more precise, very close to Hawthorne and Sepulveda. There's an office in there, the Health Integration Center. And I've been associated with David for a very long time. I do a little bit health education over there. And I have my lab at the office too. And very impressed with many people that I sent to David, and it's a very important part. See, when you send somebody to a doctor, what they tell you later on, they say, "Oh, I didn't like that guy" or whatever. No, with David, oh man, this is really nice. And one of the key things with David is he is a good listener, right? And that's why I really think that medicine is. It's not really a real science, it's an art, right? It takes a real artist in order to look at a person, evaluate the problems, and come up with solutions. So, David, very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, for the beginning, what's your address and the phone number at your office?
Well, the Health Integration Center is located at 3220 Sepulveda Boulevard in Torrance. And the phone number there's 310-326-8625.
Okay.
They can also check out our website. It's healthintegrationcenter.net.
Okay. Very good. We got this one. Okay. In many different areas, God, there's so many different areas where something is going on nowadays, especially in overall general health care, right? We just talked about that yesterday with that movie, Avoiding Fire, or what?
Escape Fire.
Escape Fire, right?
Great film.
Great film that shows how really faulty and problems, with our healthcare center, that the healthcare product, that we need to change this back towards true healthcare.
Yes, because in the U.S. we really have a disease management system. Doctors are looking at the disease and what they can do in terms of medication. But what we really need to get back to, as we know, is prevention. The basic health principles that people need to adhere to. Proper eating, exercise, proper mental thinking, stress management, and so on.
Yeah. Absolutely, no question about it. And that brings us back to my old mentor, Professor Emanuel Churaskin, right, Alabama University School of Medicine, who defined and actually recognized by NIH, National Institute of Health, his definition of lifelong health. It basically is a state of homeostasis achieved by doing so and so many health practices correctly, right?
Yes. And you know that Chinese have talked about yin and yang for thousands of years, and that's what we're talking about is the balance. Too much of one is not going to be helpful for you. And that's why we approach the health through the balance and integration of body, mind, and spirit. And nowadays, Western medicine is realizing what the Chinese talk about yin and yang is really the balance of the autonomic nervous system, like you say, homeostasis.
Right. And that's also the basis of your book, Healing What Hurts, right?
Yes, this it's a nice resource for people reference to show what they can do to help themselves in terms of with natural approach rather than just medications for the different medical so-called systems that has happened to people.
Right. I always felt like everybody who comes to our health center, I said, get David's book, read it, right?
Well, it's an inexpensive way of really finding out solutions.
Right.
That's why I co-authored the book because I find that it's really people need to take help themselves with their health.
Take charge of their own health.
Exactly.
No question about it. Yeah.
That's why I'm trying also to change the language of medicine. Instead of calling people patient, I like to call them health participants because they really have to participate in their health. The doctor is not the person that's going to help them get the good health.
Right.
Okay? That's why jokingly I say is that we don't see any patient in our practice, but we see health participants.
Good thinking, right? It very much agrees with the recent publications by Baylor Medical College, Mayo Clinic, and so on. And what they wanted to acknowledge in the medical field is that a lack of exercise is actually a medical condition. They wanted to define this as a medical condition.
Yes.
And it's, in my opinion, not in my opinion, I mean, the data longevity studies really show that. Like if you do longevity studies where you combine all the good health practices versus all the bad health practices, and you include in the good health practices exercise, and then vitamin supplementation, environment, and everything else, and you get 100% difference in average lifespans. Now, if you repeat the same experiment without the exercise, everything drops by 50%. 50%. That is just amazing. I mean, look for any disease, heart disease, diabetes, whatever, exercise is the number one, right? And in our healthcare system, by the way, there's another movie, American Addict, right, by
yes.
Gregory Smith, UCLA professor, right, which we will be seeing soon everywhere. I understand. I just talked to them. And basically bringing this out, why we should be focusing on good health practices, on quality nutrition, and everything down the road, right?
Yeah, sometimes we call that lifestyle medicine these days
Yeah.
because it's really changing the lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of watching and being mindful what you're eating. You know, in this country, as we all know, there's such an increase in terms of diabetes, even in children. And that's because the children are drinking so much of the sodas, you know, eating of the fast foods and so on.
Yeah, all that sugar can throw your body into imbalance. It's just unbelievable, right? I mean, I actually have a few calculations in my book showing what happens to your blood sugar level by just one consumption of one can of Coke.
Yes.
I mean, it's just amazing.
It's about 7 teaspoons of sugars. Can you imagine you take 7 teaspoons of sugar?
Right.
It really makes you ill.
Right. You have about 5 grams of sugar in your entire body to keep the blood sugar normal, and now you're adding about 40 grams to it. I mean, it shows everything in balance. But let's get back a little bit more to basics, right? In your work, is there anything specific, you know, where you had special successes with some patients, or what brings out really the importance of that alternative approach?
Yes, we like to call it, of course, integrative medicine because we take a look at the person as a whole. First of all, we work on studying or understanding what the person is doing in their lifestyle. Taking into account what they're eating, the amount of stress that they're having, and then also in terms of the amount of physical activity. Okay, and then we try to individualize it for the person, doing specific testing that will help us to determine what would be working most for this person. Yeah. So I would say the success that we have really, of course, is people have a lot more vitality. Okay, people are decreasing the number of medications that they're using. With many people that come in, for example, they have hypertension, okay, and they really don't need to take the medications, but they can improve, or let's say control the hypertension through different things: regular exercises, cutting down the amount of salt that they're eating, weight loss, and the other thing, of course, is stress reduction.
Yeah, that's a very, very, very important part, right?
It's a big part. In my practice, we utilize the heart math. You know, it's been shown that the heart math is helping you to control your autonomic nervous system. And by doing that, you can find that you can decrease your blood pressure, you can decrease your stress, you can sleep a lot better. And actually, the new program that we are having now is also helping people to lose weight through the heart math method.
Right. And within naturally, we teach people to stay away from all the sugar, and especially the special, some of the sweeteners, the high fructose corn syrup, very, very bad. Anybody who wants to follow up on this, Google Sugar, the Bitter Truth by Robert Lustig from UC Davis, an MD over there. And the bottom line with all this at our health center here, or at your health center, right, is to apply these variables correctly. And you mentioned earlier that you're doing blood analysis with very different people. What's a key important part?
Well, we do blood analysis, for example, to see what deficiency a person may have. We can actually check the vitamin, mineral levels. We also do, of course, the newer blood analysis for the lipids, to check on the different particle size of the lipids, and also some genetic factors to see what's the most efficient way to help people to lower down the lipids by whether it's diet or certain specific supplements.
Right. So the basic approach is evaluate that person's entire life and lifestyle, from exercise to nutrition to supplementation to the environment to toxic chemicals in your body to possibly detoxing and so on and so on, instead of just what are your symptoms, here's a drug, prescribe a drug, right? And the people who have just started listening, I'm talking to Dr. David Wong, MD, head and founder of the Health Integration Center in Torrance, right? 3220 Sepulveda, and the phone number was
326
8625. Yeah. Yes. This is really, I mean, this is a fascinating area, and more people And that includes Dr. Ron Klotz from the American Academy Anti-Aging Medicine, A4M. On the web, it's worldhealth.net. Francis Collins from the Townsend Letter for Doctors. The Paul Bragg Institute, that also have a radio show. And I definitely want you to be on that one. And they have 70 associated radio stations that carry the program. And we are all getting together to find out what is the best way, how to start changing this disease care system back to healthcare. Right?
Yes, that's very important, and you've been a very good example, Hans. And I've known you for what, 30 some years. You know,
time goes by.
Yeah,
isn't it?
time goes by, and you still are going to the gym, exercising. You know, paying attention to your stress level. You come regularly for so-called preventive measures, getting your body energy balance.
Energy management,
that's so important.
right? That is also that's something else. Is by a Japanese professor developed. Energy management is done at the Health Integration Center once a week. I'm doing this every week.
Yes.
Very fascinating, right?
Yeah, because we found out that, you know, we are really vibrational energy. That's what our cells are. To keep our cells healthy, we not only have to give it the proper nutrients and the water, but we also need to help with the energy. Yes.
Right. Anyway, so what's the next step in this whole thing? I mean, here we have to be successful in changing that system. But while we are doing that, what is a more down-to-earth advice to people out there? I mean, I would say if you have a real problem, you can't figure it out, and you go to a doctor and he just gives you a prescription, he says, dump that doctor and go see Dr. David Wong in Torrance, right? That would be my advice.
Well, I think it's not that simple. I mean, you know, what if people are willing to make changes, we always can help to improve their status. Like you say, through whether it's a matter of getting the energy balance, you know, helping them to deal with the stress. Okay, and I've been involved with the energy healing or energy medicine now for quite a few years, because I'm associated with the organization, the Mokicho Okada organization, and we have a center also in Los Angeles. But what's really fascinating is that Mr. Okada, from many years ago, talks about the essential health or well-being of a person. He says the hospital is really not the place that people should go to. You know, it's a place of illness. What he has changed is, again, a place of wellness that people can go to get well.
Right.
So he, again, emphasized things like nature farming, eating organic foods that have no pesticides, use of art and beauty as part of the therapy. That's why when you come into our office, you see that we have beautiful flowers, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and that really makes
it's a different environment. You know, you feel comfortable there.
Yes, because we want people to be connected to nature. And we have this wonderful lady that's in her 80s that has volunteered to come in every Monday to arrange all the beautiful flowers because she wants to share the beauty with the people.
I remember this. It was unbelievable. I mean, several years ago, we were still at the old health center, and I came in and I said, "Where's David?" "Oh, he's doing the energy management." And I look in there, and David's laying on one side, and there's people that hold their hands over the body, and apparently they can sense energy distribution in your body and bring it back to homeostasis, equilibrium. And I was kidding. I said, "What can you do with a German body? You want to try it? Okay, fine. David's going to be done after 10 minutes."
That's how you got started, right?
And I go in there, and I lay on one side, you know, and they start doing it, and I immediately fell asleep. And then it poked me a little bit. Okay, other side. So I turned around, lay on the other side, right? And again, they're doing this thing, and when it was done, it's about an hour, right?
About 45 minutes.
I mean, it's just, I said, wow, what's going on? I mean, really a state of homeostasis, well-being, equilibrium. You know, I felt like, oh, gosh, I'm going to go home. I look at pictures of my girlfriend, whatever, and you know, and I'd be smiling, right? I mean, that was most fascinating. I've been doing it every week.
Yes. I mean, well, it helps a lot of people that have difficulty sleeping, for example. They find that after the treatment, they usually can sleep much better. Okay? Because the energy balancing really helps people's body get into balance. Sometimes they do go through some symptoms of detoxification, but that's always good for the body. You know, when your body can detoxify, then, like you say, you get into homeostasis.
Totally.
And that is really the key.
Right. Well, the phase Foundation for Advancement in Science and Education in Los Angeles, they published some data is about 11 years ago, where they actually did analyze adipose tissue, fat tissue, of people over 35 and 40, and they did it earlier with people who were drug addicts.
Yes.
And the basic idea was you have all these chemicals in your body
The
that
fat cells.
induce the craving for drugs, and that make all kinds of, that cause different results and symptoms and so on, and that one can get these things out of the body by doing the niacin-based detox method, right? I mean, they actually build up to 1.5 grams of niacin, the regular niacin. Got to be very careful because it makes your skin flush, and people have run to the emergency room because of that, even so it's relatively harmless. But in the meantime, they also developed another thing. You can use non-flushing niacin, 1.5 grams, go through an exercise program, and afterwards sit in a sauna. And when you sweat, the phase people analyze the sweat that comes out of your body. They put it on different spots, over your forehead, different parts on your body. They put a gauze, aluminum foil over it, and just measured the sweat that's coming out and demonstrated that what's coming out is exactly what's in your body in the same proportions.
Yeah, that's why I'm a big proponent of, like you say, using infrared sauna. The advantage of infrared sauna is that you don't have to have real high temperature like a regular sauna, but you really sweat.
Right.
You know, and we do have one of those in the office because I feel that that's a very essential part of the purification or detoxification program. And I use it myself a couple times a week. And you find that really makes your skin youthful and beautiful because it helps with the circulation.
David, you're a beautiful person from inside and outside.
Well, thank you, Hans.
Anyway, but on a more serious and science basis, very recently with the discussions about genetically modified food, GMOs, and so on, we learned more about endocrine disruption in our body. And we found data, for example, that was being published that show because of the toxic chemicals in our environment, we have girls that go through endocrine changes as early as 7. And that is so bad for those people, right? And we have boys with smaller penises. We have the endocrine system being affected. And in one of my presentations at the American Academy Anti-Aging Medicine meeting, I outlined the various different pathways when a hormone triggers or it tries to trigger a reaction in your body, for example, to stimulate immune functions, right? It's not really that easy. And at first glance, it sounds extremely complicated, right? I mean, the hormone comes to the surface of the cell. It's too big to go inside, so it locks into something that's a lock and key. On the other side, on the inside, a prostaglandin picks up the message. It brings the message to the nucleus. It copies a certain segment there, like how to make some immune stimulation, etc., going on. And then there's a messenger RNA that goes to the cytoplasm in the cell, and there is a ribosomal RNA. This is like the workbench, and the transfer RNAs. Those are the different RNAs that bring different amino acids, and so the whole thing runs off. But the most important part here is if you look at the details, 3 to 4 steps can be affected by these toxic chemicals, and especially genetically modified foods. I mean, it's just horrifying, you know. And in California, Proposition 37, the right to know. Simply, I want to be able to know if anything is genetically modified. When this didn't pass, well, very simply because the drug companies and the food manufacturers put in $44 million, and the other side had about $1 million, right? So it's obvious that. But anyway, at the same time, 2 weeks before, at Professor Seralini at Caen University in France published data, and they fed test animals the 2 types of genetically modified corn. And you can actually go to my website, right, the antiagingforme.org or the drhanskugler.com, and you can look for the Seralini, and you will find the before and after picture of those test animals. It is just amazing the tumors that those animals formed, and everybody here ignored it. Right?
Yeah, a good movie on this subject is Genetic Roulette, which is a movie. And it's excellent. It gives all the information about that in terms of what happens, when we're eating a lot of the GMO foods. Fortunately, a lot of places now, even some restaurants, will show you which foods contains GMO. I mean, they still use them, but at least they let you have the choice.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good start.
Actually, the failure in California for 37 to pass triggered in more than 40 states where they now have their own proposition. They are pushing towards that.
Yes.
I mean, there's no question about it. You know?
Hawaii, I think, is going to be banning the GMOs. It'll be interesting to see.
In Europe, a lot of these things are banned, or they have to show with really good research that it doesn't cause any harm, and so on and so on. Like when it comes to corn, right? I mean, corn. Every day, I mean, from corn tortillas to whatever you're eating, it may contain this stuff, right? And there's two types of corn. The one type of corn has a gene in it. They put a gene into the corn that actually makes the corn resistant against herbicides, right? So you can spray a lot of herbicide on there that kills the weeds, but when you eat that corn, you get the same stuff in it with the food. And the other one is they put a gene in there. When the corn ripens, the bugs come and they want to eat it, right? And the corn makes its own pesticide.
Yeah.
Well, the corn doesn't have a radar system like we have at Torrance Airport, incoming flights, 12 o'clock or whatever, take precautions. No, it makes these pesticides all the time. And this is what Geraldini at Cayenne University fed the animals and then showed how detrimental it is to our health. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah. But that's why I think as consumers, as people, we have to make the choice and to choose the kind of life we want to live, And for me, it's been a joy being a doctor because I feel that my work is really as an educator, helping people, teaching them, and let them make the choice. Rather than imposing my viewpoint on them. That's why we find that when people come to see us, we work as a team. Besides myself, of course, I have two naturopaths, chiropractor, people that do body therapy, nutritionists. So we have like a team that can work with you to make the changes and accomplish the goals that you would like to see.
Right. So if you out there have been listening and you only have a doctor when you go in, or you complain somebody who writes your prescription, I would suggest dump this doctor, go to the South Bay, Dr. David Wong at the Health Integration Center in Torrance, very close to Hawthorne and Sepulveda, 3220 Sepulveda Boulevard, telephone 310-326-8625. 8625, right? And make an appointment. And I'm quite sure you will be happier and healthier in your bottom line.
Well, thank you, Hans, for having me today on your show.
Well, okay. I think we've come to an end with this interview. David, very nice to have you here.
Well, thank you again, Hans.
So stay tuned for a little bit of Here's to Your Health with Josh Lane coming up with Hans Kugler and Dr. David Wong. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Jerry Bell of the Daz Band in New Birth.
And I'm Brahima Arsalan.
Inviting you to join us every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific Time for Jerry Bell's R&B Soul Classics, baby.
Join us as we play some of the greatest hits of soul and R&B and listen in to interesting discussions with the legends of the music.
So don't you forget, join us on the Jerry Bell's R&B Soul Classics. You'll love it. Exclusively on latalklive.com.
You can also catch us on iTunes Radio, R&B Live 365, Radio Flag, and now Stitcher Radio.
Or watch us and listen directly at latalklive.com, baby.
Reality radio handcrafted for your listening pleasure.
This is LA Talk Live,
And we are more than just talk, baby. We are music.
People, it's Jennifer Tapia from StarCam. You guys might know me from the red carpet, catching up with all the stars, but guess what? We're bringing the red carpet to the radio right out here on LA Talk Live. I'm going live Thursday nights at 6 p.m. We got hot topics, celebrities, and much more. We were featured on Chloe Lamar on E!, Howard Stern, T.I.'s Family Hustle. You know how we do. So check it out on Thursday nights, 6 p.m. All things Hollywood, everything celebrity. StarCam Radio?
StarCam Radio? StarCam Radio!
Oh yeah, follow us on Twitter at StarCam Radio.
This is Brett Chapin.
And this is Dorothy Dillingham Blue, inviting you to join us every Saturday at noon Pacific Standard Time for our show, La La Land Talk.
Join us as we talk with some of the top talent in LA. Artists' untold stories, your phone calls, and live on-location broadcasts have made La La Land one of the best sources in LA for everything entertainment.
So don't forget to tune in to La La Land Talk.
Exclusively on latalklive.com.
You can also catch us on iTunes Radio, R&B, Live 365, Radio Flag, and now Stitcher Radio. Or watch and listen directly at latalklive.com.
Saturdays at noon Pacific Time. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/LaLaLandTalk, Twitter, twitter.com/LaLaLandTalk. Reality radio handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is LA Talk Live.
And we are more than just talk. I think we've got a Shakespeare monologue or two we could do. Yeah?
Jazz hands.
Kickball change.
Good
That's
stuff.
what I'm saying. Mm-hmm.
I'll do some Pippin.
Ooh, yeah. Some miming. I'm in a box. I'm in a box. I'm in a box.
My clothes ain't all fancy, and my car ain't brand new, but there is joy in my house.
Hello, I'm Joel Ramirez.
And I'm Lolita Robinson Coppage, and welcome to Joy in My House
On LATalkLive.com. Inspirational radio
with a touch of recovery.
A reality show where nothing is left unsaid.
And no one is insignificant who says it.
Exclusively on LATalkLive.com. You can also catch us on iTunes Radio R&B or watch us on Ustream TV.
Reality radio handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk.
Joshua Lane, member of the board of directors of Dr. Ann Wigmore's Hippocrates Health Institute, Josh Lane was part of the Dr. Ann Wigmore team that brought wheatgrass, sprouts, and raw foods to a worldwide audience. And now the host of Here's to Your Health on LA Talk Live, Joshua Lane.
Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Here's to Your Health on the LA Talk Live television network. I'm your host, Joshua Lane. And today on Here's to Your Health, I have Billy Hayes, who, as a young man, you know the book, Midnight Express. You probably saw the movie in the late 70s when it was actually a big international hit. Billy Hayes was a young American, affluent, educated American who traveled to Turkey and was detained for trying to smuggle hashish out of Turkey, spent 5 years in a Turkish prison, wrote a book about it. The movie became an international sensation, quite frankly, and Billy Hayes is our guest today. Billy Hayes, welcome to Here's to Your Health.
Nice to be here.
No, it's a great pleasure to have you here. Now, your book is a little departure from my show, is a wellness show, but I thought, because I'm a member of your generation, that people know the story and find it interesting. And looking at you, you look like a healthy man.
I am.
After spending 5 years in a prison.
Probably the worst and the best thing that ever happened to me, prison, though. And while I was in prison, I definitely got into my yoga practice, which I was just beginning prior to getting arrested. And I've done yoga every day since then, since 1969, and I still do it every day. And it keeps me healthy and, more importantly for me, emotionally balanced and reasonably sane. Again, I'll take reasonably sane in this world any day.
And now, since many people who are listening to the show, certainly saw the movie,
right,
or know of the movie, or watch it later on DVD, obviously, you spent 5 years in a Turkish prison, and having read the book, you were subjected to, starting from the top, as not, the food was awful, the place was filthy, you had no privacy, you couldn't wash, there was violence and brutality all around you. As you mentioned to me in the green room, everyone's smoking cigarettes all around you. So this is a very horrible experience for a young man. You were a lifeguard, you were physically very fit. Do you still have nightmares about that every day?
Not the way I did originally when I first got out. Again, I got home on a Friday. By Monday, I was writing the book. So all of this stuff is being dredged up. I wanted to forget prison, not write about it. But actually bringing it up was the best thing that could have happened to me, therapeutically. It became a catharsis. As the words settled and stuck on the pages, they sort of came out of me, and these horrible nightmares faded away. Every once in a while, I'll have a dream, and I'll be back in Turkey. But it's not a nightmare kind of dream. Again, I loved Istanbul. I spent a lot of time there prior to getting arrested. I think it's a fascinating, amazing city, and it was sort of the city of my youthful dreams. So I'm back there, and I float around. Every once in a while, I find myself like floating through the prison. But it's like looking down on things as opposed to running, chasing, having guards with sticks chasing me. I don't get those dreams anymore, which is a good sign.
Now, for, let's say, people who listen to this broadcast who are, say, our children's age, they probably don't know that when you were in jail, you were actually a reasonably well-known celebrity, because Newsday, an important publication in Nassau County, and well-written publication, frankly, as newspapers go, is pretty strong publication, they were keeping your case alive before the metropolitan New York public.
Right. Newsday was my hometown paper, as it was. So when I was arrested, it made a big splash there, and they had the story. And then it sort of faded a bit, and then I was re-sentenced. At one point in my sentence, instead of going free in 54 days, the high court changed my sentence, and they brought me back to court and re-sentenced me to life in prison. That made a very big splash in Newsday, and they started publishing some of the letters that I wrote home to my family and friends, and they became a champion, as it were, of the cause of trying to do something about getting me out of prison. The problem, of course, is that really there's nothing you can do to affect the policies of a foreign country. Rightfully so. I mean, you may not like the policy of it, but you have to deal with it. And as I discovered, you're in that country, you deal with their laws. You can argue and object to it, but those are the laws you have to live with.
Public opinion does have...
Eventually it'll change things.
Does have some power. So you were arrested for smuggling hashish out of the country. And what was the original sentence?
4 years and 2 months.
4 years and 2 months, and you thought that's awful enough. And then, for whatever reason, you were brought back into court, and they changed your sentence.
The High Court in Ankara is the top official note in the Turkish government, and they objected. Richard Nixon started the war on drugs right around the time I was arrested, and they were pressuring foreign countries to increase their drug penalties with the threat of taking away, rescinding American aid that they were getting. So it started all of these drug penalties that are so severe now in most foreign countries that weren't like that prior to the war on drugs. And they ended up sentencing me just before going free. The High Court said, let's show what we'll really do to the American government about affecting higher penalties on people. And I was one of the first people to suffer from the effects of this war on drugs policy. And they changed my sentence, which never got officially stamped in the High Court in Ankara. 54 days before I was about to go free, they brought me back and resentenced me to life, which the same judge who originally sentenced me, he felt bad. He really did. He held his hands up. He said, my hands are tied. This order comes down. He said, I wished I'd retired before I had to render this sentence. But render it he did. He sentenced me to life. The only prerogative he had was he could lower the life sentence to 30 years.
And this is for hashish.
It's
not
pot, by the way.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So it's not that you and I are saying that was not illegal at the time.
No,
it was illegal, and it's still illegal.
Absolutely.
But really, it seems like pretty minor to just destroy a person for 30 years. It doesn't really make any sense to you or I. And I think to many people in this country who listen to the broadcast, they would think, my God, that just seems like barbarism. It just seems completely wrong.
Well, we have high drug penalties in this country, too. Not quite that bad, but we have them in a lot of places. In other states, you've got it where it's virtually and legally. In Washington and Colorado, the federal government still has their own opinions. But the whole idea of imprisoning people for marijuana is insane. The war on drugs, it makes no sense from any perspective, whether you're a liberal, whether you're conservative. From the conservative point of view, think about the amount of money that is lost in law enforcement and keeping people in jail each year for pot. As we sit here discussing the merits of this, there are 22, 23-year-old kids who are doing really hard time in federal prison for marijuana, which is legal in several other states. There's no validity to it, and it's costing the U.S. taxpayers an immense amount of money, and it's corrupting the legal system, and the police are corrupted by it, and it's created this entire substructure of violence around drugs. I mean, drugs are cheap. They're plants that grow out of the ground. They're expensive because we make them illegal, and then all of the violence and the illegality that it creates is a big problem that could be, I think it could be rectified by legalizing drugs.
You know, I had Isaac Campos on my show, and Isaac he's a Ph.D. out of Harvard, and he wrote a book on marijuana and cannabis, and he said, well, you have to understand this. The police departments, when they seize your property, they are able to retain that property.
Right.
So when they go against you for marijuana, they can seize your car, the boat, the jewelry, the guns, whatever they find, and they keep it. And it's very difficult, he said, to get that back. And also the people that incarcerate you, many of those are private corporations.
Right.
They make money on that. So unfortunately, there are money-making organizations that don't necessarily want to promote legalization, whereas you have a lot of individuals who might want it, but they're not organized.
Well, the individual people who are profiting from people being arrested, the prison systems, and as you say, the courts.
And I don't say that to be a conspiracy theorist.
No,
I say that's
it's
just
a reality.
Yeah,
and yes, the police are corrupted by all of this, and they're spending a lot of time and effort dealing with pot smokers. It's a consensual crime.
Right.
It shouldn't even be a crime, whereby they should be out dealing with the real bad people. I know who the bad people are. I lived in prison for 5 years with people who could care less about another human being.
Right.
I mean, a pot smoker, whatever they are, they're not hurting somebody else. If they hurt themselves, that's one thing. If they get so stoned they drive their car into a building and kill people, that's the responsibility. But you have to accept the fact that people can do what they want. They should be able to do what they want. As long as I don't harm you or your property, I should not be incarcerated for anything I do. And that's what we have in this country. And it's gotten to such a far degree that I think the pendulum is swinging. I think there's enough people aware of the fact that this makes no sense from an economic point of view, much less a moral and a legal point of view. But again, pot was made illegal when, in 1937? And part of this whole thing is William Randolph Hearst and DuPont. Timber and chemicals are threatened by hemp. Hemp is a product that has been for 10,000 years. It's an incredible plant, and it's got pharmaceutical values. It's got paper values. It's got, the Constitution was written on hemp.
Oh, really?
Of course it was. The sails from the Mayflower were made out of hemp. This is a plant that should be grown. At one point in the United States, early on, you could pay your taxes with hemp, with industrial hemp. The U.S. government paid early settlers to grow hemp because it's such a valuable product. And then it became illegal in 37 because it threatened William Randolph Hearst timber industry and DuPont chemicals industry. And it still does. And it's been made to be illegal. It's made to be this terrible thing that's destroying the morals of our country. All of that is just media crap. None of it is true, as we know. Now, does marijuana have a potential for abuse? Sure. I think if you came home and smoked a joint and got into your reading or did what you want, you're fine. If you smoke 3 joints before you go to school every morning, you got a problem.
Right.
If you drink a beer while you're watching a baseball game, who cares? If you have a 6-pack before you leave for work, you've got a problem. It's not the beer or the hemp that's causing you the problem. You've got the problem. You're using that to cover them up.
Right.
But don't arrest people because they want to smoke pot. It makes no sense.
Because of your fame, international fame, because of your book and then the movie, which was just a big hit.
Yes.
Have you been approached by organizations to speak? I mean, have you had influence now since the book came out?
I did in the mid-'80s, I did 103 college lectures around the U.S. and Canada, which I loved doing. I'd probably still be doing them, but it turns out my lecture agent was a crook who literally got arrested and his agency folded.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, right. And I stopped doing lectures then because I was acting and doing a lot of other things. But I'm getting back into lecturing now because I think it needs to be out there. I have a message that I think reverberates with college audiences. I used to come out and stand in front of this group and spread my arms out wide and say, if you're this stupid, look what can happen to you. And all of these college heads would nod. And it's the truth. At the very least, my life is a cautionary tale. Don't get busted in a foreign country for smuggling drugs. You won't be happy about it. But for me, I always bring it down to do what you like and know what you're doing. And knowing what you're doing means you take responsibility for your actions because you have to live with the consequences. I never thought of that when I was smuggling hash. Oh, I was just running so crazy and footloose and fancy-free and sex, drugs, rock and roll. Suddenly, I was busted, and the reality hit me like the ceiling falling on my head. That not only have I screwed up my own life, but all the people who love me have to suffer. That my mom goes to sleep with every night with pain in her heart because of what I've done. That was the hardest part of jail for me, actually. The dirt and the violence, I can handle all that. The fact that every night my mom suffered because of something I've done, that really brought it home to me that that's the consequence of my action.
The fact, having just recently read your book in preparation for this interview with you, the fact that you had a mom and dad who were supportive, that you were well trained, that you were an affluent young man, that really, for me, added very much to the book because it added depth to the story for me, as opposed to like some poor young man who has nothing and nobody and can't write about it and can't talk about it. It gave a lot to the book for me as a reader.
Well, I was an English major. I mean, I went to Marquette University in journalism school, and I actually left college just prior to graduating because I wanted to get out on the road, experience life like my hero, Jack London, so I could write about it, which eventually I did, not quite the way I had planned. But the ability to write, it's something I've always had, which is why in jail, writing the letters out to family and friends, the letters could go out beyond the bars where I couldn't. And it was my...
And excuse me, when you wrote letters, they didn't rip them up? They actually let you send these letters?
They let us send the letters. We could get mail in, and the prison censor would actually mostly check to see is there contraband in the letter. And we had a lot of foreigners. So, I mean, they couldn't have a translator of all of the languages that we had of foreign prisoners.
Right.
So they pretty much just looked at them. And if there's nothing contraband or a file or something in it, they just let them go. I wrote in code. I mean, Midnight Express itself is a code word that was used in jail for escape. You get on the Midnight Express, the Midnight Flyer, the Midnight Ghost. It's the train on the far out track. All the letters I wrote home to family and friends, first off, the censors wouldn't care about too much. When I was really talking about stuff that various times talking to my dad about the Midnight Express on the far out track or the transfer train. At one point, the U.S. government was trying to transfer me home. They were creating this prisoner exchange treaty, which is actually in place now. It took 5 more years after I escaped, but it allows Americans in foreign countries to be transferred home and so on and vice versa. Foreign nationals to go back to their home country. But when I was writing, I used a lot of code and things. I talked to my dad about, Willie Mays. Willie Mays was famous for stealing home plate. I say, Willie's leaning off third base. He's not going to get picked off. Don't worry about it. So anybody reading this is not going to know what we're talking about. And a lot of letters could get smuggled out. There were easy ways of getting letters out. So nobody cared too much. So all of the Midnight Express letters were literally, it was my way of connecting with the outside world. And my girlfriend at the time did all of this amazing traveling around the world and climbed mountains and raced dog sleds. She was one of the first Iditarod dog sled racers. And she would write me letters, and I lived through her letters vicariously. And it was a way out beyond the weight of the walls, because eventually the walls they crush you. Prison 24 hours a day says you're a loser, you're a loser, you're a loser. And eventually you believe that, and you are. And it's why guys coming out of prison just get hardened in ways that you never can change, and you get broken in ways that you're never going to fix again. And
was the violence a daily concern? You had to defend yourself against violence on a daily concern?
Yes and no. Again, violence, from the outside, people think the worst part of jail is the dirt and the violence. The dirt doesn't bother me. The violence, I'm not real big, but I used to be very fast and nasty, and I used to do all this martial arts crap. And I got really lucky. The first night in jail, I got into a fight with a prison trustee who one thing led to another, and he ended up yanking this blanket, and next thing I know, bang, I've hit him in the face. He's down. His nose is bleeding. His face is swollen up. He's screaming. The guards are dragging me out. I'm trying to explain to them I don't speak Turkish yet. They don't speak English. He hit me first. All they know is new guy in a fight, first night, lesson needs to be taught. And how they do that is common throughout the Middle East, a punishment called falaka. They tie your ankles up and beat your feet with a stick. Which, I thought they were killing me, hitting my feet and my hands, and I'm going like, and banging and banging. It turns out it was not a bad beating at all. They didn't break any bones. That's how you differentiate if it's a bad beating or not. If they don't break bones, it's not a bad beating. They break bones, it's a bad beating. They break bones and they bring you back the next day and beat you some more. That's a real bad beating. In my case, they just wanted to teach a lesson to the new guy. I mean, people said, well, you were tortured in jail. No, I was not tortured. Torture is when you know something, they want to know what it is you know, and they do bad things to you until you say what it is. They never did that. They were just teaching me a lesson. I mean, people got tortured in prison, but it was like the Turkish students, who were, there's a lot of political unrest going on. Well, when they catch some of those guys, they want to know who are your friends and where do you come from. That's bad. That's when you fill in the blanks of the worst things that can be done to you. That's what they do to people because they want that knowledge. For me, I was just a hash smuggler. I was just thrown in with the rest of the foreigners.
And then my question is, and what did it do to you emotionally to suddenly be in a place where you figured you don't count for much at all, and you've just been beaten up? Now, you say it, you talk about it now. Of course, it's happened a long time ago, and you're safe here in America. But when you got beat up, what did you think at that point?
It made me realize right away, don't get into fights here, because what they do in jail to discourage fighting is if you and I were in a fight and they come in and you're all bloody, they beat me equally bloody. Or if I'm all bloody, they beat you equally bloody to kind of balance it out. So there's no way to win in a fight. You have to get in, you have to get out, be done with it, and be away from it before you can get caught. Most of the violence in jail, if you're a victim on the outside, you will be a victim on the inside. If you're not, you're not. You constantly get tested. But the fact that I got in a fight the first night with this prison trustee guy, and he walked around the prison for 2 weeks with his face all swollen and a big black eye, that was really good for me. Mm-hmm. Everybody said, what happened to Ziad? And it was like, well, this new guy, this Willie guy. And it was like, really? That made it easier for anybody who's looking for somebody to pick on. They'll look on somebody else. I mean, if you're not an easy target, you get pretty much left alone. And I always say that I'm too smart for the tough guys and too tough for the smart guys. So people pretty much left me alone. The hard part of jail, again, was of watching time go by, of realizing that the years just passed, of watching your teeth rot out of your head because I had very little dental care. That was my biggest physical problem.
Yeah, so did you have cavities that were untreated? I
had some, and they got worse, of course. Eventually, I had 5 teeth pulled out in the 5 years I was in jail.
They actually pulled teeth out for you there?
Yeah, the old Armenian dentist would come in for free. He'd come in, and you'd sit in the chair, and this old Armenian guy's got a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, and he's got one eye closed, and he's squinting, and he's leaning over you. The first time he came into the office, I watched him hook up this kind of little machine thing like this, and because the power goes on and off so much, he has a little foot pedal, and he starts hitting this foot-powered drill. And I looked at this foot pedal, and I'm thinking, oh my God, but I had such a toothache that the only thing you can do is the dentist comes once a week. I thought it was like on a Tuesday. And on Monday night, one of the first months I was in jail, this tooth started to throb in my head, and somebody gave me some kind of a blue pill to try and knock you out, whatever it was, just to try and get me through the weekend with this incredible pain in my mouth.
Oh,
and
God.
By Tuesday, I sat in the chair, and there was the Armenian dentist, and I watched him hit the foot pedal, and the next thing I know, he's sticking needles in my mouth and yanking this tooth out of my head. That was the worst physical part of jail, was
So there was no fillings of teeth. They just take the teeth out.
They actually tried to fill one tooth. I tried one time to have them fill my tooth. That didn't work out very well. So after that, I never had anything filled after that. I got really lucky when I got back. I was talking about this at the airport press conference when I stepped off the plane at Kennedy, and a doctor on Long Island, a dentist, contacted my house and called my family and said, I hear about your teeth. I'd like to fix them. I said, I appreciate that, but I have no money. I owe everybody. He said, if you just come in the mornings real early, I'll fix your teeth for free. I want to hear your story. He said, I had family. He was Jewish. He said, I had family who were in the camps. And I said, well, my experience does not relate to the camps at all. Forget that. But if he wanted to hear the story, I'd tell him the story. So for a bunch of months, I would go in 2 or 3 times a week, and this guy sort of saved what was left of my mouth. I have a lot of crowns and cavities and, braces and things in my mouth now. I take care of my teeth really well.
What did it do to your self-image to lose 5 teeth in prison?
Well, guys, it's funny because people in jail, you see guys looking into the mirror. It's not healthy to stand around gazing at yourself in front of a mirror in prison, but just for self-identity, for a search for self, you see guys literally looking in the mirror, looking at themselves. And, after a couple of years, you don't look so good in jail. You're not so healthy looking. My teeth were falling out. My brain was rotting out. And again, I never thought I'd be arrested. That's how stupid I was. I'm smuggling hash. I say, well, I'll never get arrested. I'm way too smart and good looking to ever get arrested. And I believe that. That's how dumb I was. And
you were 23.
I was 23 when I was arrested. And then, as the years keep rolling by, the reality came that, wow, I could be here for a while. And then thinking I'm about to go free in 54 days and having my sentence changed to life, years have gone by. 3 years have gone by. 4 years have gone. I kept thinking after 1 year, I thought, well, now I've learned my karmic lesson and it's time to go free.
Right.
Prison was, again, the worst and the best thing that ever happened to me because it forced me to slow down. It forced me to think. It forced me to ask questions that I wasn't asking on the outside, like, why? Why am I here? In this prison, in this body, in this life, in this existence, all those metaphysical questions that I never asked while I was running free, crazy outside.
Did you really ask those questions in prison?
Very much so.
Your mind was clear enough to ask those questions?
Oh, very much so. In fact, I constantly questioned, why am I here? What am I doing? What's my purpose? I ended up finding answers to those questions, which to this day have held me in good stead. I discovered in jail that my reason for being is to love. It sounds so simple and so trite, but it's true. It's the truest thing I've ever learned is I'm touching my heart chakra here. That energy, that heart energy, my head and my balls lead me astray, but my heart leads me true. And when I realized that's my reason for being, everything else settled down. Whether I become a doctor, a lawyer, an Indian chief, or I write a book, no matter what I do, if I'm sending out that love, I'm fine. And everything else sort of settled around that. And when I realized that, it was the most valuable thing I've ever learned in my life. I needed to be way down deep in a Turkish prison to bag it into my thick head. But once I did, it made all 5 years of prison worth it for me, actually, to learn that.
Well, that's a nice way to feel about it.
It's the truth. It's just the truth. People say, well, if you could go back and avoid it, would you? Well, yeah, of course yes, I would. But at the same time, if I'd have smashed up against the wall somewhere else if it hadn't been there, because again, I was not taking responsibility for myself. I was just running wild and crazy. And life was easy. Life was so easy for me until suddenly it wasn't. Everybody goes through their own stuff that they have to deal with in their own lives. Mine just happened to be a little bit more dramatic and a little more compacted within a little 5-year period. And again, after 5 years, I was so desperate. And then I got so lucky to escape. So many factors could have come into it that if it broke this way or broke that way, I would have been shot or dead or not arrested again, though. I figured, I was so desperate. It was time. One way or the other, I'm going to be free. I'm going to be out or I'm going to be dead. But I'm not spending more time in jail because I was at that point where things were either going to harden down or break. And I didn't want to be like that.
So you in essence remained yourself, but you learned some very upsetting lessons. And again, you were exposed to a lot of violence, and you saw a lot of violence, did you not?
Yeah, it happens all around you. I got to the point where new guys come in and all the prison vultures sweep down on them. They want this or they want that, or they're going to do something or get something, work with my lawyer, and they'll take a piece. And, I'd say, well, don't go with his lawyer because he's going to rip you off. And so I sort of help out and make friends with the new guy. But I've just made enemies of the other guy. It's not healthy to make enemies in jail. Friends in jail are, you don't mess with me, I don't mess with you, we're friends. And after a while, I just stopped. I just took care of myself. I could see terrible things happening and just turn away. And when you ignore a human being's pain, it's at a cost. It's at a cost to your own humanity. It's why guys coming out of heavy-duty situations, a lot of them, they've lost something just to try and survive. And that loss is something that if you don't find it again, you're a lesser person for the rest of your life.
In the section of your book in which you are transferred to a mental hospital in an attempt to, get out,
right?
That was a very difficult section. It was nicely written, but it was very difficult.
Right.
And just there probably another 1,000 things you could have described that didn't describe for the book, but some of the things you described, the violence against the men by the trustee, the big heavy trustee,
right.
and being dragged downstairs. I mean, those must and you didn't sleep in a room of your own. You were in a room with a number of all the other cots, right? You never had any kind of privacy, so you could go to sleep for a minute and someone come over just punch you in the face, right?
All the time, that sort of thing happened. The first 6 months, I was in an individual cell. I got locked in at night, which I hated until I lost it. Like everything else in the world, I took everything about America that was bad. I protested the Vietnam War and civil rights and all this other stuff, and everything that was good about America, I took for granted until I lost it. And I lost everything in an instant. People, places, food, culture, language, law, it all went in an instant, and I had to change. And I discovered I don't like change, but I'm good at it. I discovered I'm adaptable. It's one of the things I did learn about myself that's valuable. In jail itself, you adapt to your situation, and hierarchies are very quickly established in prison. The baddest guys are on top. It's the opposite of the outside world. Out here, killers and crazy, wacko madmen are ostensibly at the bottom of the social structure. In jail, they're at the top. So, you have to learn how to deal with that. And again, I'd make friends with the baddest guys. And if either you hit him in the face, the eyes, the throat, or the balls, or you make friends with that guy because he's going to run a lot of things. As a prisoner, there were prisoners who literally ran the jail inside. These big kapadais, they're called, gangster prisoners. And here's the way things are supposed to be, the way it's presented, and here's the way it really is. And you have to quickly discover the difference between how it's supposed to be and how it really is, because it's dangerous in between. And once you learn how things are, you settle in. Again, I was fortunate in getting in a fight the first night, and having this guy's black eye was advertisement for me. People pretty much left me alone. There's always fights going on. I had a couple of other very nasty fights happening in jail, but few and far between. And they're the kind of things that I don't like to think about now, because if violence is going to happen and it's going to be you or me, and it's going to happen, I prefer it would be you than me. And
speaking of the you aspect, didn't one of your friends in jail get knifed by one of the Turkish mafioso?
Yeah. Early on, he was stabbed in the back 3 times while he was eating his beans.
What was the name of that friend?
One day at lunch. I think I called him Popeye in the book. I've combined characters and names of events sometimes, which is why it's a little confusing to me between the reality, the first book, Midnight Express, the movie Midnight Express. They keep compacting characters or changing names. My girlfriend in the original Midnight Express, I called her Lillian. Her real name is Barbara. In Midnight Express letters, all the letters are written to Barbara because there were no name changes in there. So you literally see and hear what it was that this woman provided me in terms of letters from the outside world and a touch of femininity in this cold, masculine world.
Yeah, by the way, a couple of the sex scenes that you write about, was she coming to visit you, I thought those were nicely handled, and I thought they were nicely written. And I thought, that's just, hey, it's good. It's just nicely written. And it was actually, luckily for the book, really a light moment.
Right.
Some people might think that was kind of a real rough couple of pages, but I was thinking, well, no, it doesn't seem rough. It just seems like well written, and maybe a little bit more in the Jack London mode, because it was really kind of fun. They were fun. They were fun scenes, actually, and I don't want to sound like a bad fellow saying that, but they were good scenes.
Well, again, reading the letters to me, I wrote these letters out of desperation, and the full spectrum emotionally is there. Most of the letters home to my family were almost factual, and here's what's happening, here's what's going on, what do you think about this? I need warm socks, I need earplugs, the $100 arrived at the council, stuff that dealing with day-to-day life. My friends, the letters I wrote out to my friends, I could see that whole youthful bravado that I had that landed me in that situation to start with as still part of me. But the letters home to my girlfriend, to Barbara, about half half the book are letters to her. And that's where, when things got just too heavy, I couldn't write to the folks because they were carrying the weight. So I would write to Barbara, and all the deepest pain and fear and aspirations and liberation of self, the things that I've learned that were valuable to me, I would write to her. And as I read, putting this book together, I read all of these things again, and I realized just how valuable it was for me to be able to express myself in this place and to get this stuff out, both to my family and my friends, and to Barbara mostly.
Yeah, and for me as the reader, I felt that was an important part of the book too. It was an important part of the book. So how do you characterize Midnight Express? Because is it what genre is it? Because as we mentioned earlier in the green room, I don't think it's a Jack London kind of genre. It's not an adventure story like some Steve McQueen movie from the 60s.
No,
it's not, because it's just too rough to be that.
It's a memoir, obviously, but it's a memoir that for me is I had such an interesting 5-year period. Midnight Express is just that 5 years. Letters are just the 5 years. I've got other books and things that talk about later. And again, the weird part for me was coming home and becoming this little mini celebrity and getting involved with Hollywood. I have another book that's going to come out in a couple of months.
What book is that?
Midnight Return. That's actually the sequel book that'll be out in the fall. But, people are getting so sick of hearing all this Midnight Express stuff. I'm amazed now that 40 years later that there is still such an interest in this. And I think it's because people can relate one way or the other going out into the wide world and falling into a deep hole and having to get out. And, in this case, better to read about it and learn from somebody else's mistake than your own. So, if there are any 19, 20-year-old kids out there who are thinking that they're invincible, and I know they do because I did, you're not. And if you want to really test yourself, don't do it in the ways that I did, because you discover too late that you're not invincible and you're not alone. And all of your actions are going to reverberate off you and all the people that you care about. And if it's a bad result, they have to live with it and live with you.
And the violence, because the violence to me seems like, because as soon as you go to bed, someone just gonna whacks you in the head. So
no, because they know everybody gets a pecking order gets established very quickly, and you know who to mess with, who not to mess with. You know what's going to happen if you do this. People set themselves up, so pretty much you get things established very soon of getting into jail, and you live with that. It'll change. Somebody new will come in. You'll get moved to another place. You have to reestablish yourself. But people learn how things work and where things are. Violence I had my friends who went to Vietnam and those who did come back.
You mean during the Vietnam War?
Yeah, exactly. They described something that I've actually taken their description, which is it was long moments of endless boredom, which is what prison mostly is. The boredom seeps into your brain. The boredom is what destroys you. The boredom just eats you out from inside, broken up by moments of sheer terror. And I can relate to that in terms of Vietnam, where you're sitting around and then things are blowing up. And prison's the same. You sit around, nothing happens, and then suddenly things are happening that you didn't want happening. People are fighting. People are breaking windows and taking chunks of glass and chopping each other with it, or cutting themselves with glass. People would break windows and take a big chunk of glass and then tear their arms up. But excuse me, here's the vein. If you want to kill yourself, you cut that vein. When you do this, it's just a cry for attention, which, nothing wrong with that, but that's what it was. And then they would get the attention that they deserved. Or people.
Did that happen?
All the time. People were constantly the emotional. It's weird. The toughest guys by day, you hear them sobbing in their sleep at night. I mean, sobbing in their sleep. These are guys who you don't even look at sideways during the day, because you don't want them looking at you, because they're not people you want to be dealing with. But you've learned they deal with you, you deal with them. New guys are the people who have it hard in jail, because they don't know how things are run and they have to establish their own boundaries. But once you've established it, people pretty much respect it, pretty much leave you alone. At least they did with me.
All right, let's not talk about any more violence here.
All right.
Let's
talk about yoga.
Okay, no, let's talk about cleanliness. So you mentioned in the jail that they gave you a pitcher of water and you clean yourself, and you wash yourself once a week?
Once a week, hot water comes on in the big stone sink down near the door by the cell block. You take a pitcher you scoop it in the sink, pour it over your head. If you had 7 nights divided by 70, 80, 90 guys. That's you always had in our cell block. That's for your once a week hot bath. Everybody always smelled real good. So the water comes on for about an hour in the evening in the downstairs sink. If it does. Some days it just doesn't. There's no reason. There's no rhyme. It just didn't come on that day. So there's no water. You have water in your individual cell for about 20 minutes each morning. Cold water would come on when I had an individual cell. First 6 months, I hated being locked in at night. About 12 feet long with a little metal frame bunk and a hole in the floor in the back for a toilet, but you always have to keep a heavy rock or a can over to keep the rats from coming up at night. But of course they do anyway. Lot of rats in jail. It's why people had cats. I mean, I had a couple of cats that I sort of took care of, and they're feral. They come, they go between the bars. But I had one. I watched a kitten being born on my bunk, and then about 3 years later, I watched that kitten having kittens on my bunk. You talk about time frame. That's weird to realize. Oh my God, I saw this cat as a kitten being born, and now I'm watching it giving kittens. And I'm still here. That's a tough thing to deal with, aside from looking in the mirror, looking at your teeth falling out. But
yeah, which really can't be real good for you.
No, it's not. It's very discouraging to see how your teeth keep falling out of your head. You read letters from friends, or they just got married out here, or somebody's done this, and it's nice to hear and to keep up with the outside world. But it becomes. I knew I was really a prisoner when early on I would have these dreams, and I'd be out and free, and then I would wake up in the morning, and that horrible moment of, oh my God, I'm not free, I'm still in this jail, would be there, that jolt. After a while, I realized that even if I'm dreaming about being free, I was never fooled. That jolt went away because I realized prison is my reality. The outside world has become a dream. That's when I realized I was really a prisoner, that I don't have that jolt anymore. I could be out free running on the beach, and when I wake up, it wasn't, oh my gosh, I'm still here. Like, of course I'm still here. That's the dream. The beach is the dream. The beach is gone. And I knew that, and that I've changed. That was a psychological change to adapt to it. And then, of course, when I escaped, suddenly I'm out, and it's like I'm in my dream come true. And it was a bizarre entry into world again. The running and the hiding for 3 days, and eventually coming back to New York and stepping off the plane at Kennedy Airport there was a press conference, 100 reporters at the airport, at the plane. I stepped off the plane. There was a guy saying, Mr. Hayes. I'm thinking it's the police and I'm going to get fingerprinted. I hate that ink on my hands. I said, you're with the police? He said, oh, no, I'm a Pan Am representative. Will you follow me, please? And he led me down some side stairs. I never went through customs, which I found very interesting, all things considered. But there was my dad and my brother, my lawyer, and it was so great to see them again, and I hugged everybody, and my dad said, there's some reporters here. They want to talk to you. But, if you want, it might be rough. We'll slip out a side door. And I'm thinking, I'm free, man. I'm tired of slipping outside doors. Bring them on. A couple of guys with notepads. The doors opened, and suddenly all these lights started coming on, and there were 100 reporters with microphones, ABC, NBC. People yelling questions. Billy, what's it feel like to be home? Again, how do I know? I just stepped off it never stopped.
And when that press conference happened, in retrospect, do you feel that you were good when that occurred? I mean, you certainly were real, but I mean, in retrospect, you think, oh no, I probably should have taken a week off and rested up, or no.
You know what? It is what it is, and I'm a talker. It's what I've always done. Like my mom says, you're a great BSer. So I mean, for me to get out and to talk to a press conference, it was fine. I like to talk. I'm good at it. I'm a storyteller. I've always been a storyteller. I was a writer and a storyteller. I'm an actor now. So it was probably good because it was like trial by fire. I was just dipped right into the media, and suddenly my story got splattered out across the media universe.
Right.
And it's still spinning.
And your story was told in general sympathetically.
By
the media.
Yes and no. Sure. Yeah. For the most part, they were sympathetic. I mean, there are a lot of people who said, he's a drug smuggler, and
right.
they should have locked him in and thrown away the key. And I don't have problems with that. They have their own opinions. I could care less. I remember doing some early press conferences and stuff, and I was on a train, and some people said, didn't we see you? And a couple of kids talking to me. It's like, we saw you on TV, or you're the dude with the hashish from Turkey, and all the people. This is in the subway in Manhattan. It's like, oh my God, and all these people are talking to me, and I felt kind of weird again, because prison, you try and keep a low profile. Suddenly, right. Like, I'm out there. Everybody knows who I am.
Right.
Most guys coming out of jail don't say, hey, I just spent the last 5 years in prison.
Right.
I didn't have that choice. Everybody knew I just spent the last 5 years in prison. And I actually got off the subway and people started moving away. And this one little lady was there who tugged on my sleeve. And I looked over and she said, I had a daughter who died of a drug overdose. And I think you're a piece of, and then spit on my pants. It was like,
no kidding. Yeah.
It wasn't violent, but it affected me more than if somebody came up and tried to punch me in the face. It's like, oh my God. I really, from her perspective, drugs are drugs. Her daughter died of a drug overdose. I'm not going to stand around and say, well, what drugs are we talking about? Like dangerous drugs like alcohol and tobacco that are legal, that are advertised on every sport event? I'm talking about pot. Hash is pot. But, I'm not going to explain this to this lady whose daughter just died.
Right.
But it sort of gave me a real shocking realization that there's a lot of different perspectives on my story, and my family had bad phone calls. I mean, my home phone, people would call up and say these terrible things to my folks. They've already.
Okay, so
that's hard to talk about.
All right. So my next question for you then is, having gained notoriety for this event, do you feel that after that event that you were always pretty cautious because you thought the guys who hated you were looking to get you? And I'm talking about political authorities thinking, we're going to make an example of this young fellow, this young liberal who's a drug person.
Absolutely.
And so you thought, no, I can't do any of that stuff anymore because they're looking to get me, they're watching me, and that's not paranoia.
No, well, it's not paranoia.
No.
I was concerned about, again, this is 1975 when I first got out, and the movie came out in 78, and the book in 76. I was concerned because of the drug laws that exist right here in this country. Mm-hmm. They were way worse 30 years ago. They've gotten better. And I was such a high-profile target, and I've had, a lot of friends say, you need to be careful because people are going to be watching you.
Which I'm sure they probably were watching you.
I'm sure they were to one degree, but then again, my concern was also with the Turkish government. What are they going to say about, I've escaped. I'm an escaped convict. They really didn't care about me getting out. They didn't care even when I wrote the first book, Midnight Express, which they didn't like, but they have to accept because pretty much it's my little story. They were really upset when Midnight Express, the movie, came out. The changes in the film in particular creates, you don't see a single good Turk in the whole movie, and it creates this overall impression that all Turks are terrible, that Istanbul is a horrible place, which is not true. I mean, I loved Istanbul. I was there 3 times prior to getting busted. I loved the city. I got along great with the Turks. I didn't like their prison, and I don't like their legal system. That's going to be true of any country in the world. You get busted, and I guarantee you won't like their prison. You won't like the legal system. But the country itself, I loved Istanbul. It's a great place. So the Turks were very upset by the movie Midnight Express, especially.
And the screenplay was written by Oliver Stone when he was a young, talented unknown
screenwriter. Right. He wrote a scene in the film where I'm being resentenced to the life in prison scene, where in the film it's full of anger and rage. A nation of pigs, and I do this to your mothers, and I do this to your sisters and your brothers. And the Turks saw that scene, and they issued an Interpol warrant. Again, not when I was arrested, not when the first book, Midnight Express, came out, but when they saw that scene in the movie, they issued an Interpol warrant for my arrest that lasted for 20 years. Thanks, Oliver. But it as long as they don't have me, I didn't care so much about warrant. I was a little concerned about, somebody coming up with chloroform and wing. Next thing I know, I'm back in Istanbul again.
Right, and that, in theory, that could actually happen.
I was a little concerned about it. I was actually carrying a gun at one point, which just shows how irrational my perspective was. Because what am I going to do with the gun? Shoot somebody? What's that going to do with me? Then it's one reason why I didn't buy a gun in jail when I was escaping. I could have. I had money. You can buy anything in jail if you have money. But if I've got a gun and somebody's going to point their gun at me, either I shoot them or they shoot me. And if I do shoot them, where am I going to go? I'm not free anywhere in the world. I have to live in Paraguay the rest of my life. The fact that I escaped, I had a pot charge. When I escaped, I, again, went off the island in a storm, and I swam across the Maritsa River from separates Greece and Turkey. And I knew the Greeks would never send me back to Turkey, not for pot. Again, if I'd murdered someone, aside from the moral karmic implications legally, I couldn't go anywhere. But I knew once the Greeks got me, they would never send me back to Turkey.
And do you feel that now that that you attract people who are sympathetic to your plight and people who disliked your plight? And what about now, as a mature man, And this seems to have been cycled around again. There seems to be another cycle of interest in this.
Well, letters is out there. I mean, these are letters that they've been in a box in the attic for 25, 30 years. And my wife forced me to clean them out. And, next thing I know, I'm putting them down, I'm organizing them and reliving this whole experience through the letters that I wrote home to people. And they gave them back to me when I first escaped, and I used them to write Midnight Express, and then I put them away, and I never looked at them again. Bringing them out and recycling them brings the story back up. Obviously, for me, personally, these are the letters that I wrote out of desperation and fear, and they work for me, and they work as a book, too. I see now there's a real arc to the early letters, and then the foolish bravado that got me into that position lasted for a while. You can hear it in the tone in the letters, and then it starts to change as I start to change. And after a couple of years, there's a real huge change in the letters and hopefully in my perspective of what I'm writing about and what I'm considering. And by the time I was escaping, I think I'd found a peace within myself. I was still locked up, and I was going to be free or be dead to get out of jail, but I found a certain peace within myself, and that's reflected in the letters too.
That was I just finished reading the book, so the section in which you hiding in that little barrel and then escaping and stealing a boat and not being able to find the oars, and I thought that was really quite remarkable. That was quite remarkable, frankly. Let's bring it right to today. Right. You just came back from Britain. Did they just not do a ballet of your book? They did a ballet. So obviously, now who's the choreographer on that?
Your listeners are never going to believe this because I was there and I still can't believe it. Peter Schaufus, he's a Danish choreographer. In his 50s, he was a world-class dancer many, many years. He ran many companies. He did a ballet, a Midnight Express ballet. He does ballets about sort of pop culture things. He's trying to broaden the ballet base because, again, you can only do so many Swan Lakes. And he did one on Elvis. He's done one on the Rolling Stones. He did Midnight Express as a ballet, which sounds bizarre, except it worked so well. It's such an emotional tale, my tale, and ballet is so expressive. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. It was frightening. It was amazing to see.
It was modern dance.
It was modern dance. It was ballet, modern dance ballet, and it told my story. They used pretty much what was in Midnight Express, the book. They took a couple of things from what's in Midnight Express, the movie, which I understand. They used some of the music from the movie, some brilliant stuff that Giorgio Moroder did, and they used Mozart in other places, which made a very nice balance. But the audience was just fascinated and enthralled with the ballet.
How large of a cast was that?
They had about 20 dancers. They had 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 main dancers playing myself, my dad, my friend from inside, the head guard, the bad guy, and a few people like that, and then a bunch of other guards. And then they had about 8 or 10 women who danced and were like the chorus, as it were. And one of them played my girlfriend who came for a visit. Very powerful, emotional scenes. I mean, the scene where my dad came to the visit so affected me because that was, again, one of the harder things for me was to have him. He's a very proud man. He's a guy who, his whole life, he's the person that everyone turned to. His integrity was unquestionable. He never lied to us, ever. There's still things about him that I'm trying to emulate in my own life. And to see him on stage, as it were, with a 63-year-old dancer, a guy who many years...
Really?
Yeah, he was a brilliant dancer in his day, and he ran a bunch of companies, but he hadn't danced in 30 years. He said, oh my God, I'm going to need some ibuprofen. His part wasn't too excessive physically, but emotionally he needed to bring that to it, and boy did he ever, because the scene with him and me was just so moving, such a powerful scene.
And I'm assuming that you did get a lot of media coverage for this in Britain, so you were on interviewed newspapers and on television?
Yeah, we did a couple of the Midnight Express letters. I was selling it over there. I had it did a couple of signings. I did breakfast with the BBC. We got to talk about my book and about the ballet, and I actually got to shoot a small part in a film over there too, in Birmingham, which was all part of the whole thing. It was wonderful, a wonderful little film. I got to play a child molester.
Oh, boy.
A billionaire American child molester, which is a very strange thing.
Did you do a nice job?
I think I did. They loved it. I found, I keep thinking I want to send out love and light and have birds come on my shoulder, and I keep playing all these bad guys and these wackos. So I guess there's something that needs to be out there.
Oh, they just have you typecast and that's it?
I do a lot of crazies. I don't act much anymore, but when I did, I used to play a lot of crazies. For me, it was weird to find the core of this guy who had been abusing his daughter, who was the lead character in the film. She's 16 now. And
what can you mention the name of the film?
Yeah, it's called The Truth. Brilliant script. And Tony Clark is the director and the writer. To try and connect with this guy, to think, how can you abuse your 8-year-old stepdaughter, actually, your 8-year-old stepdaughter for 8 years? I have a friend who spent a lot of time, he's a lawyer, and dealing with this. He has clients. He worked with NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy League.
Right.
So I talked to him quite a bit, and I said, how do these guys justify? And we talked quite a bit, and when you look at it that way, okay, it sort of makes sense. He said, there's the scary thing. That's what they say. They look at it that way, and it makes sense to them, which, I'm the last person to tell people what to do or not to do sexually, but when you're dealing with kids who are under the age of consent and you're using your adult wiles and the trust that they put in you to manipulate them, that's a crime that, it's not
bad for the children for sure.
It's bad for the children. It's bad for the people who get arrested and put in jail. The guys who suffer the most in jail are child molesters, because anybody in prison can say, well, we're better than them at least.
Right.
They're the low on the rung of prison hierarchy. They get it the worst. And, there are a lot of people say, well, they deserve it. Well, I guess. I think we get what we deserve all the time, which is kind of frightening to think about, but I think it's true. One way or the other, I think we get what we deserve or what we need to learn. Maybe that's more like it.
Well, Billy Hayes, a remarkable interview. I thank you very much for being a guest today on Here's to Your Health. This is Josh Lane. You're on the LA Talk Live television network. I'd like to thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next week.
Thank you.
For more information about the guests and sponsors of Here's to Your Health on LA Talk Live, please call us at 818-707-0005.